across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Thursday afternoon. There's loads to talk about. Remember Hamas? Remember those terrorists who took part in the 7th of October, perpetrated the 7th of October massacre, raping, burning, killing people? Apparently they're not terrorists, according to one law firm. We're going to be talking to one of the lawyers who's gone to the Home Office today to say that Hamas shouldn't be seen as terrorists and that we should de-prescribe them. Prescribed organisations obviously mean terrorist organisations, but apparently they're not, according to this law firm. That'll be an interesting conversation. We're going to talk about that in a second with Robert Halfon, the former Conservative government minister. We're also going to talk about what the government is saying today. They want bobbies on the beat, more of them, in peak times, as they say, because Starmer has told police forces they have to do that. Well, why doesn't he give them the money to do that? Maybe because we don't have any. We're also going to talk about the tariffs and what's happening. Big U-turn by Trump last night. What has happened to the markets? Migrants, only 5 of them have been convicted of piloting migrant boats this year. How's that smashing the gangs? We'll get a sport update a little bit later on and talk about the police force, West Yorkshire Police, which is blocking white applicants to boost diversity. Yes, really, it's racist. Straightforward, no doubt about that. If you think I'm wrong, lift the phone. Tell me what you think. 0344 499 1000. We're also going to talk about the Birmingham MP, nicknamed Voldemort, who took a luxury Japan trip during the bin strike. Maybe he should have been in his constituency. Just a thought. Let me know your thoughts on all of this, whether you're in Birmingham or wherever you are in the UK or around the world. There's plenty to talk about between now and 7 o'clock. You know by now that on all of my shows, I make sure that as many people get on the air as possible, whether that is through a text message, a phone call, which is my favourite thing, or a voice note. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. That's the number for phone calls. That's the number for voice notes. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does 3 things. You can send the voice notes on that, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Plenty to talk about between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk. So Hamas, you know those guys in Gaza who perpetrated the 7th of October, the ones who are holding 59 hostages, who originally held 250 hostages, killed some of them, the people who raped people, the people who murdered and gang raped women, the people who burned hostages, the people who burned people on the 7th of October and leaving about 1,400 people dead. Well, there's a group of lawyers in the United Kingdom who've been instructed by Hamas to take on the government to say that they shouldn't be called terrorists. Hamas shouldn't be called terrorists according to this legal action. Why is that? Well, the legislation they're using, this will be a big shock. You better sit down. You better sit down for this one because it's really going to shock you. What legislation are they using? The European Convention on Human Rights. Yeah, the human rights of Hamas, which are obviously something I worry about a lot because they clearly worry about the human rights of all the people they murder and hold hostage, including the 59 people they're still holding hostage in Israel today as we speak. Let's take a look at why the law firm in this country have taken on the case, instructed by Hamas.
We are instructed by Hamas. We are today at the Home Office and we are going to hand in an application under Section 4 of the Terrorism Act to have them removed from the list of prescribed organisations. We have the application in here which contains very, very strong legal arguments grounded in national and international law, and we're about to hand it in to Yvette Cooper and ask her to have some courage and make the correct decision.
We'll be talking to one of those lawyers in that little video a bit later on in the programme. Let me tell you, you're going to want to see and hear that because I have a few questions for him. I've actually one main question for him which will become very, very clear, hopefully a little bit later in the programme when he joins us. In the meantime, let's talk to Robert Halfon. He's a former Conservative government minister. Robert, are we through the looking glass here?
Well, I thought I'd be amazed by some things, and the barbarity of Hamas is bad enough, but the fact that they're actually human beings in this country who are lawyers who want to go to the Home Office and in essence defend Hamas by saying they shouldn't be a terrorist organisation, it's just impossible to believe. In fact, I couldn't hardly believe it when I read it in the newspapers this morning. I think it's pretty sick, given what Hamas did, given what Hamas stand for. They stand for anti-Semitism. They stand for eradicating Jews. It's not just about getting rid of Israel. They've made it very clear about their feelings about Jews. You just have to look at their covenants.
The hour of judgment shall not.
Organisation.
The hour of judgment shall not come until the Muslims fight the Jews and kill them, so that the Jews hide behind trees and stones, and each tree and stone will say, "O Muslim, O servant of Allah, there is a Jew behind me. Come and kill him." Except for the Gahar tree, for it is the tree of the Jews. There is no solution for the Palestinian question except through jihad. And Ismail Haniyeh, who commented on the loss of civilian life in Gaza on the 26th of October 2023, said, "The blood of the women, children, and elderly. We are the ones who need this blood, so it awakens within us the revolutionary spirit." Ghazi Hamad on the 24th of October 2023. "Israel is a country that has no place in our land because it constitutes a security, military and political catastrophe to the Arab and Islamic nation." He also vowed to repeat the October 7 attacks time and again until Israel is annihilated, expressing a desire to sacrifice martyrs for Hamas's ideological aim of destroying Israel. Those people apparently aren't terrorists, and we should be using the European Convention on Human Rights to make that point clear. Robert, this is a 106-page legal application to Yvette Cooper. We're told it is strongly based on international law. I don't know if you agree with me, but I think I would file it under B for bin.
Well, I hope the Home Office file it in the B for bin. I go back to my original point, how it is that lawyers, so-called lawyers in this country, could spend time doing such a thing. Apparently it's not against the law because they're not being paid by Hamas. If they were, they'd be supporting a terrorist organisation. But they are giving de facto support. They're giving de facto support to an organisation that massacred hundreds of people on October the 7th. They've killed people, many other people outside that awful episode. They sexually assaulted women, raped women, did some dreadful, horrific things. As you've mentioned, they still have hostages, and now they're using the so-called ECHR. I suppose the only silver lining to this is that they are making the case quite strongly for leaving the ECHR, because if they can say that this organisation should be defended and not be described as terrorists because of the ECHR rules, all they're doing is showing, if by a miracle that they won this case, the flaws in the current ECHR and the way it operates.
I wonder if there's any point in the case, because it sets out 3 grounds for its appeal, including the prescription, calling Hamas a terrorist organisation in UK law, which is the case at the moment, is incompatible with Articles 10, 11 and 14 of the European Convention on Human Rights, because it unlawfully restricts the freedom of speech and assembly of those with whom the British state politically politically disagrees. I wonder, given the low level of arrests on the hate marches in London, which involve many hundreds, perhaps thousands of people who are pro-Hamas, and the fact that so few arrests have actually been made, is there any point in this by itself? Are there too many people who support Hamas who really are being stopped, Robert?
Well, I just make a very important point, that when the European Convention of Human Rights was set up, it was set up because of what happened under the Nazis against Jews. Those people who set it up in the beginning never, ever envisaged that it would be used to defend people, a terrorist group. There's still a terrorist group that also hate Jews in the way that it is being done. And it was very important to remember that. But there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, when you see these demonstrations and you see people giving some kind of support for Hamas, or wearing symbols, whether it's the parachutes that landed into the kibbutzes on October the 7th, they seem to get away with it on the whole. And I find that quite astonishing. And we have to make it absolutely clear that any support for Hamas, direct or indirect, should be dealt with the full force of the law, because the law says that it is a terrorist organisation. I'm glad that the Home Secretary has said that it is a terrorist organisation, and it will remain so.
I've just been reading through some of the logic, I use the term loosely, in this legal application, and it notes the definition, it says, also covers all groups and organisations around the world that use violence to achieve political objectives, including the Israeli armed forces, there's a shock that they've mentioned them, the Ukrainian army, and indeed the British armed forces. So they are essentially arguing, these lawyers, that the UK armed forces are terrorists. What do you make of that, Robert?
Well, they're in essence, it's moral bankruptcy. They're in essence saying there's moral equivalence between the Ukrainian army defending themselves against Russia, between Israel defending itself against Hamas, and the British Army, part of a democratic nation that has existed for hundreds of years and developed democracy over hundreds of years. And I think it kind of shows the bankruptcy of what these people are proposing. And as I say, I can hardly believe that lawyers in this country actually believe this stuff and want to spend their time doing this. And I can only see it really as a publicity stunt, because I can't envisage in any shape or form any court that would accept this kind of submission to them.
We will see what one of the lawyers in question says a little bit later on in the programme. We'll be talking to Frank McGuinness, who's one of those lawyers. I wonder what you think, Robert, about the thought that France says it could recognise a Palestinian state in a couple of months' time. In June, they are saying may well happen. And this is just one of the many countries around the world that does actually recognise a Palestinian state. We don't, of course, but formal recognition by Paris would mark a major policy switch, presumably risking antagonising Israel and many countries such as our own, which do not recognise a Palestinian state.
I mean, well, first of all, I'd ask what kind of Palestinian state are they talking about? Are they talking about the West Bank, or are they talking about Hamas continue to be ruled by Gaza? It's clearly premature, and none of this can even be discussed until this war is over, until, in my view, Israel has eradicated Hamas from Gaza. It was fascinating to see a week or so ago that actually there were hundreds of people, of Palestinians in Gaza, demonstrating against Hamas to great risk to their lives, because it is a totalitarian statelet under Hamas, and these people get taken away and put into prison, and much worse things happen to them as well. So why on earth the French are doing this? I mean, it's very sad, actually.
Is it irresponsible of the French, Robert?
Well, I certainly wouldn't be doing what they're doing. And I think we should wait. Before October the 7th happened, it was very likely that Israel would have signed a peace treaty with the Gulf states. And I think that would have changed the whole course of history. It would have brought long-term peace to the Middle East. And I think we need to deal with Hamas in Gaza, let the war end, and then try and build those relations, that Israel builds those relations with the Gulf states before people start talking about a Palestinian state. I certainly wouldn't be doing what Macron is doing.
Robert, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate that. I appreciate your thoughts on that. That's Robert Halfon, former Conservative Government Minister. Graham in Bushy has been in touch and says Jeremy Corbyn described members of Hamas as his friends. And let's not forget that Keir Starmer described Jeremy Corbyn as his friend and would have served in his cabinet had he become the Prime Minister. Jez in Sussex says, regarding the lawyers representing Hamas, they should be utterly ashamed, but I suspect they sleep soundly in their £1 million homes in the suburbs. It's disgraceful, says Jez. From Anthony in Selby, he says, hi Peter, when you're questioning the lawyer, can you please ask him why they're accepting funding from a terrorist organisation? Well, they're not accepting direct funding from Hamas, it should be said. As far as I'm aware, says Anthony, being funded from a terrorist activity is an illegal act. It is. It would be an illegal act under the Proceeds of Crime Act, but they're being instructed by Hamas, but the funding from it hasn't come directly from them. So happy to clear that up. But we will be talking to that lawyer a little bit later on in the programme. The Board of Deputies of British Jews has said, as Palestinians in Gaza protest for the removal of Hamas, this deeply misconceived challenge shows the regrettable addiction of large parts of the UK Palestine movement to the terrorist organisation Hamas. Hamas documented their own record of murder, rape and kidnap on the 7th of October 2023 in obscene detail. Hamas has been proscribed in the UK since 2021 for its long-standing record of terror. The firm and others assisting them in bringing the case for Hamas should be ashamed of their support for a proscribed terrorist organisation. Khaled has given me a ring from Leicester on 0344 499 1000. Khaled, you're on the air. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. I think the thing is, look, whether we determine who is terrorists and who are not, we have to look at the results of their actions. The thing is, look, if people are committing murder, people are killing innocents, people are maiming, starving people, which tends to be the case, then that description is what Israel is doing right now. Right, so the thing.
Do you think Hamas are doing that right now? I tell you what. Let's just not talk about Israel just for a second and talk about Hamas. Do you think Hamas are doing that right now?
Right now, I mean, I don't know what Hamas are doing.
You don't know what Hamas are doing? Okay. I would suggest you use this thing called Google and have a look at what Hamas have done and have been doing. They've got 59 hostages at the moment. They don't in any way dispute that they have 59 hostages. That's terrorism, isn't it?
But the problem we have, Peter, is that all you're going to state is what Hamas is doing. You can't see what Israel is doing. Are you saying that no babies have been killed? No 6-year-old Hindu?
No, I haven't said that. I'm not talking about that. I'm not saying. At what point in this conversation have I defended Israel? Have I defended what Israel has done?
So, but the thing is, you've got to look at the bigger picture, Peter. The thing is, this did not start on the 7th of October 2020.
Well, it did. It did because there was a massive. I mean, so hold on. Let me just be absolutely clear here, Khaled. Are you saying that Hamas aren't terrorists? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that Hamas would cease to exist if Israel stopped its land grabbing, stopped killing innocents, stopped imprisoning
So there's a period
innocent people.
Okay. Maybe you can get through the next couple of sentences without saying the word Israel. If there is an organisation that murders, maims, gang rapes, burns people and takes hostages on the 7th of October, do you consider that organisation a terrorist organisation?
Anybody, as I've told you, anybody who murders, kills, maims, locks up innocent people, starves people to death, of course, they are terrorists. That is a terrorist action.
So if I just ask you really simply, Khaled, really simply, are Hamas terrorists? Can you just say yes or no?
You see, that's what Nelson Mandela was called when he was in South Africa.
So what I'm getting from what you're saying, Khaled, I don't want to put words in your mouth, and that's why I'm asking you a really simple question. I'm not interested in Nelson Mandela. I'm not interested in the IRA. To be honest, I'm not actually interested in Israel in the context of this situation. What I'm interested is looking at what Hamas do, and you are what you do. And if you simply say that we know, as you have admitted and said, and say that you accept that Hamas on the 7th of October and since then have murdered people, raped people, burned people, and are holding 59 hostages, that's a terrorist group, isn't it? So I ask you again, really simply, are Hamas terrorists?
First of all, don't put words into my mouth. I did not say people were gang raped. You have to look at the facts of what actually happened on the 7th of October.
There were gang rapes on the 7th of October. It is well documented. There were gang rapes by Hamas members of Israeli citizens at the Nova Festival on the 7th of October. That is a fact.
Peter, get your facts right.
That is a fact. No, you're not going to tell me get my facts right. My facts are right.
No, Peter.
You're telling me my facts aren't right. Okay, you won't tell me whether you think Hamas are terrorists, and you're telling me my facts, which are accepted and happened, are not true. That's what you're saying, Khaled.
I'm saying things did happen. Things should never have happened on the 7th of October. I agree with you that there should not have been an incursion into the land of Israel, as it were. These things should not have happened. But you have to look at the consequences. Why? I mean, look, when you lock up people in a concentration camp for so long, they're going to.
Why do you call Gaza a concentration camp? Why do you use that language?
What do you mean? Why do you use that language? Because
in what way was Gaza a concentration camp? In what way was it a concentration camp? Maybe you can explain that to me.
Amnesty International, UN.
Oh, Amnesty International. Well, we got to take their word for it because they know everything, including using the word genocide, which is not correct.
UNICEF, James Elder of UNICEF. There's thousands of people, thousands of organizations across the world, including many reputed, honourable organizations who've counted this as an open air concentration.
Do you know why they say that? Do you know why I think they use that phrase, Khaled? I think they use that phrase because they want to say what's happening to people in Gaza is the same as what the Nazis did, and they want to call Israel Nazis. That's why I think they did it. In 2005, Gaza was given over to the Palestinian people. The Israelis were not involved.
You've heard of the Union Plan, Peter, I presume. You know what the Union Plan is? The Plan Dalet? You've heard of that?
Yep.
This is documented stuff. 1948. I didn't write it. Israel wrote it themselves.
Why are you going back to 1948 when I've asked you a really simple question, which is, are Hamas terrorists? And you haven't given me an answer, Khaled.
If I come to your house, Peter, give me an example.
You've said a lot of things, Khaled, but you haven't said that Hamas are terrorists.
Why should I state when I don't know the exact facts? I've not met any Hamas member. I have not affiliated with any of Hamas. I don't know.
Hamas are terrorists, and Khaled, you're willfully ignoring the facts here. And I'm afraid we've got to go to a break, and this conversation is over. But you're more than welcome to ring in on another occasion. Khaled from Leicester there. Thank you to Michelle, who says even for trying to represent Hamas, this lawyer and his firm should be banned from practicing law and representing anyone in this country for life. Michelle, we'll talk to him later on. We'll see what he says. And Mick in Wallington says the Hamas submission just proves what left-wing lawyers think of the British public. In less woke countries, this would be considered treason and their companies shut down. Who is funding them, says Mick in Wallington. More on this throughout the programme. We're also going to talk to John Hayward Cripps in a second about Starmer's plan for policing in this country. And also, let me know your thoughts on what Khaled has said there, and indeed Robert Halfon. 0344 499 1000.
We should have racist policies for hiring police because these people come to this country and don't learn English. Doesn't seem the right priority at all.
Julia, it's not racist. It's perfectly legal under the Equalities Act 2010 to have positive action.
It's racist. It might be legally racist, but it's racist.
Well, how is it racist, Julia? Giving somebody else, giving them the opportunity to apply, helping them.
If you discriminate between people based on the colour of their skin, that's racism.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everyone who has been in touch, including this person, no name here on this text, who says, regarding this London firm of lawyers representing Hamas, who first approached who? Did they approach Hamas or did Hamas approach them? How did Hamas know that they were a sympathetic firm to deal with? Maybe this firm needs to be investigated. Well, we will be talking to them a little bit later on in the programme. You're going to want to hear that interview, and we'll ask them as many questions as I can. Thank you to everyone who has been in touch as well. Patricia on WhatsApp says that bloke was seriously misguided. Perhaps he's been watching too much Al Jazeera. Tony says you will never win with a terrorist supporter. Now, I'm not suggesting that Khaled is a terrorist supporter, but I did ask him on a number of occasions, quite calmly, whether he thought Hamas were terrorists or not. He did not give me a straight answer. Hamas are terrorists, says Tony. Selene says, well done, Peter, with that caller from Leicester. I don't know how you managed to keep your calm. And David says you exposed Khaled, who constantly rings up Talk. He is a terrorist Hamas supporter. 1-0 to you, Peter, says David. Well, as I say, I'm not suggesting that he is a supporter of terrorism, but I did ask him on a number of occasions, are Hamas terrorists? He didn't give me a straight answer. And thank you to Mohammed Nadim, who has been in touch as well, who calls me a Jewish terror-supporting fat scumbag. You need some de-radicalisation from this sick Nazi cult. So many thanks to you, Mohammed. I hope you have a lovely day. Fat? Really? I mean, I know I have a few extra pounds, but I mean, are you 7? I'm sorry, do you not have a better insult? Can you maybe tweet me back with a better insult, and I'll read that out the next time, maybe something that's maybe a bit more personal. Right then, we're going to talk about Keir Starmer, we're going to talk about his policing plan, and this is the fact that he is saying that the police should be on the beat in certain circumstances at peak times or lose their additional government cash. Neighbourhood policing guarantee, that's what Labour says. Let's see what the Prime Minister said about his government's new policy earlier today.
That's what the neighbourhood policing guarantee is all about. Police back on the beat where they belong, restoring pride and confidence in our communities, and rewriting the social contract to restore safety and security to our streets. That's the change that working people voted for in July, and the change that this government is delivering.
John Hayward Cripps is Chief Executive of Neighbourhood Watch. John, presumably you're delighted by this news?
Yeah, I think it recognises what communities across the country have been asking for and demanding for years and years. You know, increased visual presence of police officers on the beat. I mean, I think, you know, our members, we've got something like 2.4 million members across the UK, and, you know, that's something that we hear really regularly, is that they would like to see more visible police officers on the beat. So yeah, we would really welcome this, but how it's implemented will be the key to its success. Not just more, but we know that there's a reduction in crime when police are seen for a while in a particular area or on a patrol, but it'll be about how the police interact and communicate and liaise with local communities.
And it's really, I suppose it's really about reassurance as well. If you see a police officer, there's some people who are afraid of the police. I don't think they should be. When I see a police officer, my blood pressure goes down, because I think, right, I'm much less likely to be a victim of crime now that I can see a police officer. All of them in London, where I live, seem to wear high visibility clothing. I know that's the case in most other police forces as well. But John, you say it is in the implementation of all of this, and I do wonder how confident you and your members are that this will work and will actually reduce crime.
I think it's got every chance. It's the right thing to do without any shadow of a doubt. I mean, I think the key, as I say, will be about whether there is interaction between the police and communities. You can't, you can't police communities effectively unless you know them first, and that means the whole of the community. So not just those that shout loudest, but every member, the voices we hear less of, but all communities, and that kind of interaction with the police. It'll take a bit of time. We know confidence in the police is at fairly rock bottom at the moment, and building up that trust will take a bit of time. But having named police officers that are visible and that are available in those communities and don't get abstracted off to other jobs whenever the need rises, that will make a huge difference to how confident people feel and reducing crime.
What do you make of these respect orders? They seem to be a sort of revamped ASBO, that anti-social behaviour orders that were around under Tony Blair's time. They can be against adults for street drinking, drug use, harassment and intimidating behaviour. Are they going to work, do you think?
Again, it's all in implementation. I mean, if people have such an order and then it's not, again, then it's not police, then it's not helpful. But I think we know, I mean, what we find from our members and from, I mean, we work closely with also kind of shopkeepers and retail. It's the local police, it's retail, it's local communities, local people. It's all of that group coming together to kind of make it less likely that it's comfortable for either street drinking or drug dealing in those places, in our parks or outside our shops. It can't just be, it's not just one of those things, just having police there more, unless they're going to be there 24/7, which none of us can afford. That's not going to make a difference. It's the police, the community and local businesses that can make a difference. And when they work together, and it's incumbent on the police to communicate and work with all of those groups, then it has a decent chance of being successful.
It's interesting that so much crime is online these days, and I'm sure there are police officers, we're going to speak to a former police officer a bit later on in this programme, who would presumably say, well, you can say, Keir Starmer can say to police forces, you've got to get out on the beat. some police forces, I would imagine, would argue it's not that they don't want to be on the beat, it's that there is so much work to be done and can be done solving online crime, paperwork that has to be done in stations and so on. It's not because they don't want to be out on the beat, it's because that they can't, because they have such a heavy workload. And even if they are out on the beat, will their workload just be so heavy that actually crime may not be reduced to a degree? Are you worried about that element of things? You're saying it's in the implementation, but we can see certainly some of the origins of problems that may be ahead, I would argue.
No, I think the increase in cybercrime is a huge strain on the police force and how to deal with it. As we know that cybercrime and cyber fraud and those kind of things aren't contained to a police force area. They're national or international. And I think there have been some announcement this week about looking at having a nationwide approach to that. But of course, there are increasing number of and different types of crime. Crime's changing, society's crime changing, and the police changes. But unless communities and individuals feel confident in the police, they've not got a hope in hell of reducing crime or feeling confident. So yes, the police have got endless priorities: online crime, child grooming, international and serious and organised crime. Those are all huge strains, but it's really important, and I think the police would absolutely recognise. There's certainly senior police officers that I speak to. You need the community that you police need to feel confident in you, and if they can, when you're trying to prioritise other things, they'll give you a bit of slack. But if they don't feel confident in you and you're not visible, you've got a very little chance of being a good police force.
John, how many people through Neighbourhood Watch schemes are resorting to these private security firms? I spoke to someone who ran one a while ago, a couple of months ago, I think, on this programme. And the fact is that there are some people who can afford it and there aren't many who can, but there are groups of people who are collectively putting their hand in their pocket and making sure that private security firms are essentially patrolling or at least on call in certain areas. That, to me, just shows a real lack of faith in the police. I wonder if the police can get that faith back.
I think they can. I mean, I think it's interesting, because I think in a funny sort of way, Neighbourhood Watch or other community groups that kind of work together and support each other can provide that kind of visibility and support and kind of connectedness that helps people feel safer in their areas. We know that something like a quarter of people don't feel safe in their local communities, and the biggest group there are young people, not older people. It's younger people who feel unsafe in their communities. But by being connected and having a degree of agency about your community, knowing people there, knowing your local police officer, I think that's what will make people feel safe. And I think that has it's proved to work in all sorts of different areas, not just in the UK but elsewhere. But it's not a quick fix. It will take time, and increased officers will certainly is a big step towards that, but it will take a bit of time. And ourselves kind of feeling a bit more confident. It will probably mean that we'll report more crime, and that will be a sign of, again, feeling more confident. We know young people, when we speak to them, one of the reasons that they don't report crime is because they don't think anything will happen.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a real indictment.
Yeah. No, certainly, and I've been a victim of crime and haven't reported it, as have many of my guests and indeed fellow presenters as well. John, thank you for your thoughts on that. John Hayward-Cripps there, Chief Executive of Neighbourhood Watch. Lots of people getting in touch on my discussion with Khaled a little bit earlier on. Campbell has been in touch on Twitter to say, your caller that stated that your facts weren't right, Peter, said a minute later he doesn't have all the facts. Well, if that's the case, how could he know your facts are not right? Delusional? I'd say so. Well, it's interesting with Khaled, and one thing I probably should have brought up is he said, I don't know, I haven't met Hamas members. I wonder how many Israelis he's met. I wonder how many times he's been in the room with Benjamin Netanyahu. I've never been to Afghanistan, but I have plenty of views on the Afghan war. I don't necessarily need to have been there to have an opinion, and neither do you, and that's why I want to hear it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Thank you to Roy, who says, after watching Leicester City's woeful attempts at playing football this season, I didn't think I could be any more embarrassed to be from the city. Cheers, Khaled. Jane says, what is needed is SAS-style police teams on the streets, more robust, a police force, not a police service. We also need the police to be safe too, though, says Jane. Lots more to come, and we will discuss in just a moment the tariffs, the effects that are going to be they have had with the UK Director of the European Centre for International Political Economy. Donald Trump blinked last night. He did a major U-turn. We still have 10% tariffs, though. Is that going to mean that car workers and lots of other people in this country are going to lose their jobs? We'll find out in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Mohammed Nadeem has been back in touch. I'm not going to read out all his messages because they're not very nice, really. So why didn't you read out your reply when you asked me to leave the country if I don't agree with you? I did not reply that to you. That is false. Everyone can see you F-E-R, maybe knows I'm a cat person, who you are, a racist Jewish terror state supporting fanboy. Do you know what I'm going to do, Mohammed? I haven't replied to you, but what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to block you. Because you're just not very nice, really, I think, and you're just not really saying things that are, you know, true and stuff. Another person says, Khaled, yet another supporter of Hamas. I'm not saying for a second that he is necessarily, but that's the opinion of this tweeter. Why is Gaza a concentration camp? Surely Egypt could open their borders to the Gazans. Watch We Will Dance Again, a documentary about the Nova Festival attack. There are no words to describe the sickening Hamas murders. I've watched We Will Dance Again. It is not an easy watch. Definitely don't watch it with kids. It's still on the iPlayer, and the BBC doesn't do many good things, and it doesn't do many things that I support them and praise them for, but We Will Dance Again is a brilliant documentary. It wasn't made by the BBC, but they did show it. We Will Dance Again, well worth watching. It's a very unpleasant watch. Lots of people sending in nice messages, and I'll not read them all out, but listen, you know, there is free speech in this country, and people have a right to criticise me, and indeed criticise the state of Israel and Hamas, which I'm going to do by calling them terrorists. Dave says, great start to the show. You stood your ground well. Talking to that caller, he appeared to stand up for Hamas. Would have the same view if one of the hostages was a member of his family. Positive, unbiased policing with results makes people feel safe, not the present style of policing, says Mick. Another big issue for the government to deal with is the tariffs. We still have a 10% tariff. You might have seen, you know, U-turn from Trump, or he blinks and changes his mind, and he's done all those things. And China now really is the one in Donald Trump's mind's eye. We got a bit yippy, as he said, a bit afraid in his words. I hadn't heard that word before. David Hennig is with me. He's UK Director of the European Centre for International Political Economy. David, the world is perhaps in a better state than it was this time yesterday, but it doesn't seem that the UK is necessarily.
Well, look, it's all a bit more stable, whatever President Trump meant by that word, and it's not a trade term, I can assure you of that. You know, we're a little bit more stable. The stock markets have stopped crashing for a while. They're still pretty uncertain. You know, we don't imminently fear the collapse of financial systems. That's the extent of the good news. Yeah, we've still got problems on trade. There's still a lot of tariffs.
Yeah, and Donald Trump doesn't seem to either. Let's just hear a little clip of him speaking about the stock markets. This is earlier today.
The bond market is very tricky. I was watching it, but if you look at it now, it's beautiful. The bond market right now is beautiful. But yeah, I saw last night where people were getting a little queasy. I think everything had, well, the big move wasn't what I did today. The big move was what I did on Liberation Day. I did a 90-day pause for the people that didn't retaliate, because I told them if you retaliate, we're going to double it. And that's what I did with China, because they did retaliate.
That is Donald Trump. I think he was actually speaking yesterday. And David, I mean, he thinks it's all fine. He thinks it's all marvellous. He said in the Oval Office as well that they had a huge rally in the markets in America. I mean, they had a huge rally because he changed his mind, and he is backtracking on this policy, didn't they?
Yes. I mean, look, in Trump's world, everything he does is going to be genius. So if he's forced to backtrack, it was all part of the plan originally.
Well, that's actually what his Treasury Secretary said as well. He said that this was something that was all part of the plan. And I was about as convinced by that statement as I was by the Treasury Secretary's teeth. Have you seen those teeth? They're just not in nature. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that Donald Trump is saying everything's fine, nothing to see here. It's all going to be marvellous. By the way, China, you're in trouble.
Well, and China's not taking that lying down either, because these are two huge powers. But you know what? Who knows? US and China could do a deal tomorrow, and President Trump says, I knew that this was going to happen all the way along, and I've got the greatest deal ever. Same with the UK. Right now, we're still facing 10% tariffs on a lot of things. We're facing 25% tariffs on our vehicles going into the US. Can we get that down? At the moment, no. Maybe we will. Maybe it doubles tomorrow. That's the problem we're all dealing with at the moment with President Trump. And, you know, you say, you know, how are UK car producers going to invest when honestly don't know what President Trump will tariff them tomorrow, in 90 days' time, or whenever it is. So we're still in that kind of difficulty. And while we are, that's still going to mean slow down, and some people are going to, lose their jobs.
Yeah, and actually, if you're Chesney Hawkes lookalike Ursula von der Leyen, you think this is all marvellous because the EU had quite big tariffs. Now they have 10% tariffs. We were told, and the White House said, don't retaliate and you will be rewarded. Lots of places who thought about retaliating didn't retaliate, like the EU, have been rewarded. But we in the UK don't seem to have been rewarded at all.
Yeah, well, I think we should stop looking for any kind of agency that we have over President Trump's decisions. I mean, I do find that this idea that President Trump is kind of listening to the UK. Look, he doesn't mind us. Look, we're in an okay position. But you know what he's like. If he decides tomorrow he's going to do a deal with the EU or with China or North Korea or whoever it is, he'll do that deal. He will not take into account our considerations and our concerns. We have to look after ourselves in this situation. Sure, let's get a deal if we can, but ultimately, frankly, we don't have that agency over him. You know what he's like by now. Everybody knows what he's like by now. We need to do the best that we can. Fortunately, we're not in as bad a state as some people. Some countries.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt said that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I would argue that the only thing that is unexpected is the unexpected or the only thing expected is the unexpected from Donald Trump. You've said in that interview, in that answer, I've literally just written this down, we have to look after ourselves. How do we do that, David? How do we actually look after ourselves in a global market? There will be loads of people watching and listening to this thinking, am I going to have a job at the end of this? Is there going to be demand? Are we going to be able to export our goods? We export a load of services in this country, but there are an awful lot of goods that we try to export to America or elsewhere, and that could be in jeopardy because of these tariffs.
Look, you've always got that problem. What do we need? We need to make sure there are enough markets for our goods. If we can't sell luxury vehicles, which is what we're selling into the US a lot, we need to try and see if there's other markets that we can sell our luxury vehicles into. If we're struggling to sell, say, whiskey, we sell a lot of that into the US. We hope that will continue, but we work to try to make sure we have other markets. We have a mixed economy, so that there's lots of different things we sell. Ultimately, you can't control another market. You can just make sure you have enough markets. So, look, I don't want to go back onto the Brexit thing, but people rightly said at that time, you can't just rely on the EU, or you can't just rely on the US either. We cannot rely on any single market for all of our goods. We need to have as many as possible. We need to sell lots of different things, goods and services, and that way you've basically got a balanced portfolio. That's what we need to be doing. Are we doing enough of that? Not quite enough. I think, we need to be working harder at a lot of this to make sure we've got the markets in place.
And business needs certainty. I learned that as a special advisor during at the Northern Ireland office, actually, during the furnace of the Brexit negotiations. And what I learned so clearly and so quickly is that business wants a bit of certainty. It hasn't got any certainty at the moment, really, does it? I mean, people are wondering, what on earth has he said now? What is different that Donald Trump has done? He has the right to say that. He's the President of the United States. He has a mandate. I'm not necessarily criticising him that per se, but it does seem one day we have tariffs, then we don't have tariffs. Maybe we'll have them in 90 days' time. Maybe we won't have them in 90 days' time. Maybe he'll change his mind next week. There is a lot of uncertainty here, and that uncertainty in business makes people, in my experience, act very, very conservatively. And I wonder, David, whether you worry about the growth that Keir Starmer wants and whether we can actually get that growth, more jobs, a better economy, better tackling the cost of living crisis if there is uncertainty with our biggest trading partner.
Look, it's really difficult. With that level of uncertainty, you're absolutely right. Business investment is going to fall. There is one place where perhaps we can make up some of this, and that is what you might now call the rearmament dividend. Europe realises it's going to have to spend more on defence. The UK is going to have to spend more on defence. As it happens, we have some pretty good defence manufacturing companies, so a little bit of that might help. So there are some companies that are going to be maybe repurposing a little bit into doing things around defence. There's going to be some extra money in that, both in the UK and across Europe. We could be part of that. So, yes, there are downsides. The US is a real problem, but first of all, those markets will go, but they'll come back again in the future. Secondly, there are other things going on, and we need to try to take advantage of those where they emerge.
David, thank you for your time. David Hennig there, who is UK Director of the European Centre for International Political Economy. Lots more to discuss. Give me a ring to let me know what your reaction is to Trump's tariffs, to whether you think Hamas are a terrorist organisation, or indeed the 1,300 new bobbies on the beat that Keir Starmer has promised. Mick has said Starmer churns out the same old smoke screens to call on the public. Where are these 1,300 officers coming from? I would not feel confident if there is disorder, if he intends to put those background officers on the front line. We are not safe, says Mick. Well, let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. You can give me a ring, you can send me a voice note, however you want to communicate. Let's get your voice on the air between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk.
We should have racist policies for hiring police because these people come to this country and don't learn English. Doesn't seem the right priority at all.
Julia, it's not racist. It's perfectly legal under the Equalities Act 2010 to have positive action.
It's racist. It might be legally racist, but it's racist.
Well, how is it racist, Julia? Giving somebody else, giving them the opportunity to apply, helping them.
If you discriminate between people based on the colour of their skin, that's racism.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk Drive with me, Peter Cardwell. Thanks everybody who has got in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. That's the number John in Sheffield has rung me on. John, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. I just wanted to mention the relevance of Passover starting on Saturday, and I wondered if that had any bearing on the timing of the court case.
That's a really interesting point, actually. It is a very incredibly important, or probably the most important. Is it the most important Jewish festival? Are you Jewish, John?
Yeah, we consider Yom Kippur the most important.
The Day of Atonement, yeah, of course. But it's up there, isn't it? It's an incredibly... Yeah. What will you be doing for Passover, John?
Well, we'll just be having a family meal on the Saturday evening, and just getting the family together.
Yeah. And do you think that the timing might be partially to do with this?
Well, it's a bit convenient, but honestly, Peter, I've got no issue with him. If he wants to it's a free country. If they want to put a court case forward, they're more than entitled to do it. And the important thing to me and my family will be what support they're going to get, who's funded it, what are the politicians going to say.
So you think it might actually be a good thing? It might actually reveal, it might flush out some of the supporters?
Well, he doesn't really need to flush them out, but yeah, of course it is. We can't, they've got to have a right to take it. I mean, my own personal opinion is that it's ridiculous, but I've got no problem with them doing it. That's the advantage of living in a free society, isn't it? And the other point I wanted to make briefly, Peter, was with it being Passover, I was really looking forward to Sadiq Khan's Passover supportive of the Jewish community.
I'd be really interested to see that video, John, because I don't think it's going to happen. He might do one for Easter. I mean, people say, oh, Sadiq Khan hasn't done an Easter one. It's not Easter yet. Let's wait and see whether he does one for Easter. If he does one for Passover, maybe he hasn't in previous years, I don't know, but I'd be very, very surprised. What did you think of his message for Eid?
Well, it's not just him, it's all the language that's used. I would trust a man like him in such a position to try and bring the community together and bring people together. And the language that's used by him and a lot of others is so divisive. And it affects us directly, the abuse that we get, on a weekly basis.
Well, what's happened to you, John?
We've had a few... We've had nothing major, but we've had a few unpleasant issues. I mean, one of probably the most unpleasant one wasn't actually us, because we're not Orthodox Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
So you just look at us as ordinary people in Sheffield. Unless it's a religious festival, we would look exactly the same. But one day, my son was at the train station in Sheffield, and he was stood behind an Orthodox Jewish man with his son, who were dressed, with a payao in traditional dress.
Yes.
And somebody went up to him while my son was there and started hurling abuse at him and calling him names, and my son had to intervene.
Yeah.
So it's just this unpleasantness and this.
And anti-Semitism is on the rise. It's something we all have to combat, Jew and non-Jew. John, listen, I hope you have a very nice and quiet and nice time with your family on Saturday as you celebrate the miracle of Passover. And I wish you and thank you so much for giving me a ring, John.
All right. Thanks, Peter.
Okay.
All the best.
Chat soon.
Cheers.
And Sadiq Khan on the 22nd of April 2024 did tweet to the Jewish community celebrating in London and all over the world, Happy Passover, Shag Samesh, Sadiq Khan. That was on Twitter on the 22nd of April. So he did tweet about it. Is he going to do a video though? And what's he going to say in the video? That's what I want to know. We'll see if he does one on Saturday. Let's hear a voice note from John responding to Khaled's call a little bit earlier on Hamas.
So he can't say whether Hamas are terrorists. Well, if that's the case, then why are the Palestinians currently protesting against Hamas? They voted for Hamas and they don't want Hamas anymore because they are terrorists. And here's Khaled from Leicester. Isn't it worrying that we've got so much, coming from these people who just support terrorism blindly?
Well, I just have to be clear that I am not, for a second, accusing Khaled of supporting terror, because that would be an illegal act, and I'm not saying that. But I did ask him on a number of occasions. It's actually out in our socials now if you want to go and have a wee look at it. I've retweeted it from my account at Peter Cardwell. If you missed it a little bit earlier on, about half an hour ago, a bit more than that, I spoke to Khaled in Leicester, and he didn't give me a straight answer. I asked him really calmly and really straightforwardly, are Hamas terrorists? Which, as we know, they are, factually. Andrew is in Hertfordshire. Andrew, what do you think about this?
You need to listen back to that interview. You were highly professional. You should be really proud of yourself.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
Really, really top notch. Look, you're very clever in that you've identified the word genocide was always identified with the Holocaust, and it's the same as anti-Semitic. The left wing have invented Islamophobia, and they've also started to adopt the word genocide to actually attack Israel and the Jewish community. And that gentleman that just came on there, isn't that a shame when you hear how his life's panned out? When you get these people on later, just ask them a couple of questions. Number one, was the attack on Israel 1,500 Jewish people dead? Because if it was a terrorist attack. Therefore, Hamas are a terrorist group.
Yes.
And we in the 70s, we had that Holocaust denier that went to court. We've always had people that have been attacking the Jewish community. And what people forget is once they finish with them, they'll turn on the non-believers. which is the rest of us. And that people don't get this. They really don't.
You're familiar with that. I think it's a poem, and then they came for me, I would imagine. Andrew, are you Jewish?
No, I'm not. But I've only ever had positive interactions with them. And I really, from a boy, I went to a bagel shop and I used to get bagels.
You're making me hungry. You're making me hungry. Do they have salt beef in them?
Yeah, that's right. And I took my daughters down to Brick Lane to the.
I've been there.
I can't be more positive about it. But I sat down as a child, and my parents or my mother made me watch The World at War when they went into Auschwitz. And people should be made to watch that at school. Yeah. That's what a genocide looks like.
Have you seen the documentary about the 7th of October, We Will Dance Again? Have you seen that one, Andrew?
Yes, I struggled to do more
me too.
than because it was, cameras now, and of course the voice wasn't there. It was horrific.
Yeah,
people should just have to watch that.
It's a very, very difficult watch. Andrew, listen, thanks for your thoughts. I appreciate your support and your call there. That's Andrew in Hertfordshire. Plenty more calls in the next couple of hours. We're going to discuss this issue. We're going to discuss the fact that only 5 people have been convicted of piloting migrant boats this year. Are the gangs really going to be smashed at that rate? And the local grooming gang reviews, rape gangs, let's call them what they are, will go ahead, says Yvette Cooper. But in what form, and are they properly being put forward? That is a big question. We're going to get through that with the former advisor to the Home Secretary in just a moment here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company, whether you're at home listening, whether you're out and about, or whether you're one of the car dwellers sending yourself home for the evening. Thank you for your company. There's loads to discuss. We're going to talk in a second about the rape gang reviews. They apparently will go ahead, according to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. But in what form? And this seems to me like a government U-turn. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We'll get the view of her former advisor, Danny Shaw, in just a second. Also, racist police applications and recruitment policies in West Yorkshire. They're currently preventing white British candidates from applying for jobs as recruits to its police constable entry programmes. Underrepresented groups can lodge their applications early. I would say that's racism. What would someone else call it? We'll see anyway. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're also talking about whether Hamas are terrorists. Clue, yes they are. We're going to talk about that with a lawyer later on who is saying that they should be de-prescribed and has put a 106-page legal dossier to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, today. She's busy today. We're also talking about migrant boats, and we'll get a sport update this hour, and we'll hear your views as well. So we'll talk about the Liberal Democrats and their incredibly important question to the government minister on agriculture. You're going to want to hear this, let me tell you. Let me know your thoughts on any of these matters. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number allows you to send a voice note with one of those just before the news. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, as I say, or a text message on WhatsApp, if you know what I mean. Or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 7 here on Talk Drive. So this is an interesting one. Yvette Cooper has insisted that local inquiries into grooming gangs in 5 towns are still going ahead, despite claims the plans have been watered down. So you'll remember back in January, there was to be a 3-month rapid review into the issue, as well as 5 local inquiries. One of the inquiries was to be in Oldham. Now, Sir Trevor Phillips, who was the chairman of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, he's claimed the government is not naming the locations for what he says are obviously political reasons because of the demographic of people involved. A very, very interesting and strong criticism from Trevor Phillips, who spoke to Times Radio, our sister station, I think it was yesterday. He spoke to them. Now, there's a Shadow Home Office minister called Katie Lamb. She's an MP who has raised this issue. And let's just remind ourselves of what she has been saying on this.
Why have ministers refused to establish a dedicated unit in the National Crime Agency to investigate councillors and officials accused of collusion and corruption? And I am sorry to say that that unit, Mr. Speaker, must also investigate police officers. In one case, the father of an abuse victim in Rotherham was arrested by South Yorkshire Police when he attempted to rescue his daughter from her abusers. He was detained twice in one night, while on the very same evening, his daughter was repeatedly assaulted and abused by a gang of men. It is clear these criminals were unafraid of law enforcement. In Kirklees, Judge Marson said, "You were seen with your victim on at least 3 occasions by the police. None of that deterred you, and you continued to rape her." How, without a national inquiry, can we know how and why these monsters enjoyed effective immunity for so long? And how can we be sure it will not happen again?
So very interestingly, first of all, that was Katie Lamb there, the Shadow Home Office Minister, sitting directly opposite her on Tuesday. That was when this was debated in Parliament. Sitting directly opposite her is the Home Office, is the Home Secretary, and also one of the Home Office ministers, one of her deputies, Jess Phillips. Now, you will know that Jess Phillips, who's a Birmingham MP, has been talking about this for a very long time. She is a very well-known campaigner on this. So why is the government not acting in the way that many people say it should, including the broadcaster Sir Trevor Phillips? He stood in a mayoral election for Labour himself. He also made these comments yesterday on our sister station, Times Radio. Let's remind ourselves what Sir Trevor Phillips, who's also, I should say, a former chairman of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, this is what he said yesterday. I'm afraid we don't have that clip just at the moment, but what he did say on Times Radio was that Yvette Cooper was failing to push ahead with local reviews because, as Sir Trevor put it, of the demographic of people involved, largely Pakistani Muslim background, and also in Labour-held seats and councils who would be offended by it. Now, Yvette Cooper said there's a lot of misinformation around this, and sadly a lot of, as she put it, party political misinformation. We've already said we'll support Oldham to have a local inquiry, and we're currently drawing up a framework for further local inquiries. Danny Shaw is a police and crime and justice commentator. He's also a former advisor to Yvette Cooper. Danny, has the government done a U-turn or not?
Peter, I don't think the government has done a U-turn. I think what they have done is put out this statement just before MPs went off for their Easter break, in a way which was probably ill-advised, and I think the presentation and the way that it was handled has been really poor. So I think certainly they're guilty of sort of poor presentation and communication around this. But I don't think they've done a U-turn. And I think, in fact, what they are doing in terms of grooming gangs and the wider issue of child sexual abuse, which is much wider than just grooming gangs, is a considerable amount. They've done a huge amount of work already in 9 months. In fact, I would say that they've done more on this particular aspect of criminality than in any other area.
What have they actually done
since Labour's been in office?
Okay, what have they actually done? Because you're saying this is a communication issue, a presentation issue. I agree with you on that. But what has actually been done? What is the change that Labour has effected in the last 9 months as the government on this particular issue?
Well, Peter, as you know very well from being an advisor, change doesn't come overnight. But what you have to do is you have to put in place the policies and the procedures to bring about that change. And they've done what the Conservatives didn't do, which was started to implement some of the recommendations from the Child Sexual Abuse Independent Inquiry, which sat for 7 years. The Conservatives did nothing about those recommendations. What they have also done is to set up an audit led by Baroness Dame Louise Casey. Now, Baroness Casey has worked for Conservative governments and Labour governments in the past. She is the most fearless Whitehall
she's a very
official.
Respected person who I'm sure will get to the bottom of this. But I suppose,
I think this is really crucial, Peter.
Sorry, Danny, go ahead.
Really crucial. Can I just finish?
Sure.
I think this is really crucial, and I don't think people understand this. She is leading a 3-month, like a rapid audit of the grooming gang, group-based child sexual exploitation across the country. And she will look at issues of ethnicity. And she will report without fear or favour. She will not pull any punches because in her career she never has done. And if she says to the government, listen, you need to do an inquiry, listen, what you're doing isn't good enough, you need to go further, then she will say it. And I think people should just pause and calm down and wait a little bit for Baroness Casey to report, which she will do in a couple of months' time.
I suppose if there is an inquiry gathering dust on a shelf and the Conservatives, as you correctly say, did not do nearly enough on this issue, if it's there for 7 years and you have people like Yvette Cooper, who's a very intelligent person, you have someone like Jess Phillips, who has been an indefatigable campaigner on this, but I think perhaps hasn't done as much as she should, although you would perhaps disagree in government about this. Why do you need a review? Why do you need Louise Casey, who I agree is a very impressive person and has done some very good work in government, but why do you need a review? Why don't you know from day one what you want to do? And why isn't the Home Office ready to go on day one saying, do you know what, there's Jess Phillips, we know exactly what she stands for, she's been really clear on this, let's go.
Well, they have done some things already. I mean, around these issues, and particularly around the issues of domestic abuse. And I've mentioned one or two things, but you know, there's a whole stream of other things that they're doing. But in that sense, why an audit? Because I think what happened when they got into the Home Office, they realised they did not have good enough data, and that's been a real problem, not just in this area, but in other areas
but you've
as well. For example,
Danny, and perhaps correctly, you've criticised the Conservatives for not implementing a review and it's sitting on a shelf for 7 years. But surely all the data was there.
I don't think it was. I don't think it was. And I don't think they have a complete enough picture of the grooming gang problem across the country.
I think there's a very clear picture. I think there's a very clear picture. Let's see what Trevor Phillips...
I don't think they... OK, we can argue about that, Peter, but I mean, that is my sense, not just in this field. Let me just give you one example to show you about how rubbish some of the data is in the Home Office. They had to put out revised figures just a few weeks ago about the number of neighbourhood police officers across the country, because those figures were completely out of kilter with what had been given when they first arrived. That was they had to go to every single police force and double and treble check they had the right number of neighbourhood police officers, and in fact they didn't, so they had to go back to scratch. That's just one example of how the figures aren't good enough.
You don't need to convince me that the Home Office isn't great. Trevor Phillips, as I say, the broadcaster, also former chairman of the Equality and Human Rights Commission, he stood in a mayoral election for Labour. These are the comments he made to Times Radio, our sister station, yesterday.
I think what the government is doing on that question is utterly, utterly shameful.
Really?
utterly shameful. And it is so obviously political that if people who in government who are responsible for this, who are in other ways, I think, completely decent people, should really be ashamed of themselves. And because it's so obvious that they're not doing this because of the demographic of the people involved. As Katie Lamb, the Tory MP, said yesterday, largely Pakistani Muslim in background, and also in Labour-held seats and councils who would be offended by it. And that's clearly the reason that they're not pursuing this. And it is utterly shameful, given what has been done to these children by these men. I cannot tell you how cross I am about it.
Danny, do you think Trevor Phillips is wrong?
I think he is, Sadie, and I've got a lot of time for Trevor Phillips. I really like him and I respect him and agree with a lot of what he says. But on this particular subject, I do think he's wrong. And I think he's misunderstood the position. And I think that was because of poor communication. I think there will be inquiries into at least 5 areas. The way those inquiries are conducted and how they're carried out, I think is still open for question. It may not be what everyone wants. It may not be what Trevor Phillips wants, what other people want, but there will be some local inquiries, and there's a £5 million national fund to assist.
And there's a respected barrister who will also give his advice. In government terms, that is absolutely nothing. £5 million is a rounding error. Danny, I want to ask you about something else, which is the West Yorkshire Police currently preventing white British candidates from applying at the same time as candidates from other ethnicities. Underrepresented groups can lodge their applications to become police constables early. That's just racism, isn't it?
I think you have to look very carefully at the detail, because we know, and it's an undisputed fact, that black and minority ethnic people in this country are woefully underrepresented in the police service. And it's a massive problem, because if black and minority ethnic people in the country don't see police officers who look like them and who are able to rise through the ranks, then they have less confidence in policing. And we know there's huge lack of confidence, particularly among black people in the police service, and that's a real problem. So there have been efforts to increase the representation of ethnic minorities in the police. You can encourage people to apply, you can help them to apply, you can make various efforts. That's all within the law. But the law, that there is a grey area, Peter, about where that help and encouragement and assistance is legitimate and legal to help people apply, and where it then crosses over the line into discrimination against white people and other groups. And I don't know, and I can't tell you for now, whether West Yorkshire Police have crossed the line or not.
I think they have.
They've been very close to it.
One whistleblower claimed black and Far East Asian candidates were considered particularly underrepresented and given a gold ranking, followed by those of South East Asian origin who were in the silver tier. White others, including candidates from Irish and Eastern European backgrounds, were bronze. I mean, that is pretty straightforward to me, Danny.
It looks pretty questionable, and I think there has to be an inquiry and investigation into it. I know Yvette Cooper, my old boss, was saying this morning that she thought that these practices had been approved by the Inspectorate of Constabulary, the policing watchdog. Well, I think we need to go back to the Inspectorate of Constabulary and ask them if they are happy with these practices, and to double check that they are.
Okay.
Because certainly they look questionable, but I think you just have to be careful, because there is a difference between positive action, which is legal, and positive discrimination, which is not.
I would argue that some positive discrimination shouldn't be legal, but that's another discussion. Danny, thank you. Danny Shaw there, police and crime and justice commentator, former advisor to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. Dave's been in touch and says, of course it's racist to restrict white people from applying for police roles at the same time as everyone else. If they restricted other ethnic groups from applying at the same time, things would really kick off. All applicants should be considered at the same time based on ability and not race, sexual orientation or gender. Dave, I totally agree with you. It should be a completely clear playing field, and you cannot retrospectively fix the problems of society by discrimination, and that's exactly what West Yorkshire Police are doing. Kenny in Edinburgh says, hi Cardi P, Yvette Cooper isn't performing a U-turn on the rape gangs inquiry because these inquiries haven't started, and I believe they won't, not under this Labour government. So what she says is just words. I bet she'll filibuster and flat out lie. Sorry, the screen keeps jumping here. She'll filibuster and flat out lie just to stop these inquiries going ahead, so their actual position on this remains unchanged. A real U-turn requires action, not just more words. Simon, who's a lawyer, says, please ask Danny Shaw if people would be compelled to go to these inquiries. Well, if it's a national statutory inquiry, the answer is yes. If it's a local inquiry, the answer is no. Chris says, Danny Shaw is talking rubbish. I can't believe that you left what he was saying. You're too nice, Peter. And Dorian says, your ex-Labour advisor doesn't understand that you cannot have local councils investigating their own feelings into child rape gangs. Well, that is true, and there have been a number of independent inquiries that nonetheless talk to people on a local level. I've actually spoken to someone who undertook one of them a while ago, and he said that actually being able to talk to someone over a coffee and perhaps even in their home about the horrific things that has happened to them is perhaps an easier and more straightforward and better thing for them to do than a big national inquiry where it's a sort of courtroom adversarial atmosphere. I wonder what you think about this. 0344 499 1000. Has Yvette Cooper done the right thing here? And what do you think about West Yorkshire Police? Gold ranking for people who are East Asian candidates, silver ranking for those from Southeast Asian, white others, including Irish and Eastern European backgrounds, they're bronze, apparently. What happens, I wonder, if you get, you know, let's say for the sake of argument, that there is, I think it's something like, yes, 23% of people in West Yorkshire are from an ethnic minority background. Right. You get 24 or 25% of police recruits who are from an ethnic minority background. Do you then say to 2% of that cohort, do you then say, well, sorry, do you know what, we've got 23%, you can't have a job anymore because we've too many of you? That's based entirely on your skin tone, nothing on your skin and your ethnicity. That has nothing to do with your abilities and whether you'd be a good copper or not. I think it's absolute nonsense. Tell us your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about smashing the gangs next. It's not going too well for Sir Keir. Stay with us here on Talk.
We should have racist policies for hiring police because these people come to this country and don't learn English. Doesn't seem the right priority at all.
Julia, it's not racist. It's perfectly legal under the Equalities Act 2010 to have positive action.
It's racist. It might be legally racist, but it's racist.
Well, how is it racist, Julia? Giving somebody else, giving them the opportunity to apply, helping them.
If you discriminate between people based on the colour of their skin, that's racism.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Katie in York has been in touch and says, what is so wrong with just hiring the best person for the job? There shouldn't even be a debate. The person who is most qualified and will do that job, the best person should get that job. Just because they may be white doesn't mean they shouldn't get the job. I'd rather have someone who will do a good job than someone who has been hired due to their skin colour, religion or sexuality. Plus, how degrading is that to only get the job because of your skin colour or sexuality? There's so much racism towards white people these days, it's crazy. You can't fix racism with more racism, but the opposite way round. Great show, Peter. You speak the truth in a respectful way, says Katie. Well, thank you, Katie. That's very kind. Do you know what? I worked in South Africa on my gap year, and they had a lot of positive discrimination there, affirmative action, whatever you want to call it. And because there had been so much racism in South Africa for such a long time, and I was there only about 9 years after democracy had come in, after the first free and fair elections. And I had a really good friend, she's still a friend of mine actually, who I worked with, knocked about with her a lot, a woman called Teresa, who is mixed race. And she got a big promotion. She got a big promotion to become a film writer on the entertainment thing. She got more money. She did really well. She's a really good journalist. She's not in journalism anymore, but she's a really good journalist. She's really good at her job. Knew loads about film, really good entertainment journalist and a business journalist as well. And I said to her, well done, congratulations. And she said, well, you don't need to say that because I've only got it because of the colour of my skin. They need more mixed race women in this newsroom. They need more senior mixed race women because of this affirmative action, or as they called it, people who were previously disadvantaged. And that really was something she thought about a lot. And I thought, well, actually, it's to do with your skill. It's to do with that you're really good. But actually, she said it wasn't at all. And that, I think, just isn't fair to anybody. How do you fix this issue? I don't know the answer. What I do know is that I think people should be treated fairly, and I think if you're going to be racist, as I believe West Yorkshire Police have been, then you need to stop that and sort it out. Let's talk about the fact that only 5 people have been convicted of piloting small boats across the English Channel this year. 6,000 migrants have made the journey. 119 dinghies have arrived in Britain from France in the last 3 months, and 6,642 people crossed the Channel, according to Home Office data. Now, in terms of people who've actually been convicted, well, we know that 17 individuals for piloting a small boat, and 5 who committed the offence in 2025, so only 5 this year. So that's since the 1st of January. So we've had some convictions, but of those who have done it this year and been convicted this year, it's only 5. So there's 64 in total, but only 5 this year. Let's speak to Henry Bolton, who's an international border control expert. Henry, they're not doing so well on the old smashing of the gangs, are they?
No, absolutely predictably so. And let's face it, whoever pilots one of these boats is not probably one of the network of organised criminals who are encouraging and facilitating the movement. This happens to be the poor sod who gets tasked to hold the tiller on the small outboard motor, probably. It's a very difficult thing to do, because if you've got a boat full of, let's say, 40 people, and maybe they've all had a turn at steering the thing, it's a ridiculous law, in my view, because it's not the piloting of the boat itself that is the issue. And it's one that's very difficult to prosecute. But of course, it makes a good headline to say that that's what we're going to start doing, but only if you actually start doing it, which is, as I say, a very difficult thing to do. So what really, in terms of criminality, we need to be going after the organised crime networks.
Is that possible to do that in this country? I mean, we've heard Keir Starmer talk time and time again. He had a big conference, I think it was last week, talking to so many international players in this. Is it even possible to smash the gangs, as he puts it? Is that something that the UK can do?
No, but it is part of the overall matrix of things that I believe that we should do. But it is not the biggest. Look, if somebody is committing a crime, even if it's not going to stop these boats, if they're people smuggling, then they need to be hunted down and brought to justice. And I just say that because it's not just about these small boats. We've got to remember that these organised criminal networks are moving people from East Africa, from the Near East, from Central Asia, from the Far East, all the way across the globe, really, and across Europe to the United Kingdom. And my experience in fighting organised crime, and specifically targeting people smugglers and human traffickers, working internationally, moving people towards the UK, is very much operationally now. I'm talking about it from intelligence and operational point of view on the ground in other countries, which is where I've worked. The fact of the matter is that these networks constitute a far greater risk than just people smuggling. There are nexus points where these networks interface with other networks that are involved in weapons trafficking, narcotics trafficking, drugs trafficking, and so on. So we do need to go after them. But if the government thinks, if the Home Office thinks, if the National Crime Agency thinks that going after the gangs, you're going to be able to smash them. I mean, we can't ignore them, but we can't. If they think that we can smash them, or that it's going to stop these boats, then they're living on cloud cuckoo land. It will not happen. We've got to apply a whole suite of different solutions to this, all concurrently. What we've got is a succession of home secretaries, a succession of governments who have applied one-off responses that they think are going to look good in the headlines and, on the TV and so on, but aren't actually going to stop the problem. You need a comprehensive, and I know people say, well, this is management speak, but it's management speak for a reason. Comprehensive and integrate is absolutely crucial. You can't have, all of these different agencies need to work together. And just finally on that, when I was doing this, we had 12 government agencies. It was something called Project Reflex back in the early 2000s for about 3-4 years. And I was the sort of pointy tip of the spear, if you like, in the Southern Balkans and Eastern Europe. I was supported almost in real time by 12 government agencies. So I had intelligence coming to me from the security service, from the SIS, from MI6, from GCHQ, from what was then the National Criminal Intelligence Service. And these agencies were feeding almost real-time intelligence to me. I was then able to fuse that with local law enforcement and intelligence, and we were able to disrupt a whole range of different types of organised criminality. But as I say, if we don't apply other things, the pull factors, what makes the UK attractive, the push factors, why are people moving anyway? And organised crime actually recruits people and goes out and markets this business. So it's another reason we should go after them. But we've got to address the whole range of these things. And primarily, the answer is, I believe, and I've said it over and over again, when people enter this country or try to enter the UK illegally, we need to detain them securely. And we need to keep them detained until such time either that we can return them, deport them, remove them, or, for example, Afghanistan, Syria, Iran, it can be difficult to actually get them back there physically, logistically. So in which case we keep them, and we keep them securely detained until they ask to go back, which they will. And I mean, the Social Democrats, I think, and it was mooted once before, that have the policy of sending them, their feet don't touch the ground. Literally, when they arrive, they go to Ascension Island, and you're not going to have large numbers of people there, because that in itself is going to deter people from coming in that route, along that route.
Okay. I want to ask you as well, Henry, just about this story. This is a talk story that we've been talking about today. This is British people hammered with a passport hike. People face paying nearly £100 just to leave the country. There'll be a lot of people waiting for their perhaps February, March, April paychecks, thinking, right, time to book the summer holiday, get away for a while if Ed Miliband actually allows us to take a plane. Tens of thousands of illegal immigrants, of course, are crossing the UK's open borders without paying a penny, and are indeed sometimes throwing their documents in the ocean. But the cost of a standard adult passport rises by £6 today to £94.50. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. For a child passport, it's £4, and if you do it by post, I think for an adult, it's £7 and £6 for a child, something like that. Yeah, I mean, it is a lot of money. It is slightly higher than the average in Europe, across Europe. Not very much, though, by about 10, 15 quid or so, but it's still 10 or 15 quid. The part of the problem here, I believe, is that in our case, we've outsourced, and initially for a period it was out to another country, the production of our passports. I can't tell you whether that's today as we speak still the same case, but I'm sure there's money in terms of that contracting and so on that we don't really need to spend if it was our own sort of government agencies doing this, or back here in the UK. The second thing is that, I mean, the passport office, I have to say, is one of the most functioning efficiently government departments that there is, or agencies.
Do you know what? I actually got a new passport a couple of months ago, and literally it took about 10 days. It was brilliant. It was actually really good. Cost a huge amount of money, but it was actually pretty efficient. So,
but what we need to do though is it's the other side of this question that we need to deal with. It's about the people who. What do we do with the people who are throwing their passports away? That's a different topic. And I've just addressed that. Yep. Detain them securely. Okay. If we need to leave the ECHR, get rid of the HRA, the Human Rights Act, and leave the UN Convention on Refugees, then we need to do that.
Thank you, Henry. Much appreciated. Appreciate your thoughts on that. Fergie's been in touch and says the cost of the bloody Sunday inquiry was over £191 million. The Labour government says that there is just £5 million to fund the rape gangs inquiry. It just shows how serious they are about having a detailed inquiry and how out of touch they are with the sentiments of the British public. Tony says it should absolutely be the best person for the job always. The problem is that employers have got to have a quota of so many people getting the top jobs, which isn't fair on these people as they might not be ready for the job. As long as the employers can justify their decision, we need them to make the decision. Great show, says Mac in Glasgow. Angie says, why did Yvette Cooper allow Jess Phillips to stand in Parliament and say these inquiries are to be scrapped, then totally undermine what she said by saying they would go ahead? Jess needs to resign as a respect to women and children everywhere. She's letting them down, and Yvette Cooper should resign after allowing this debacle. Another person says there is no disputing the fact that Hamas are terrorists. People need to understand that we can argue with others' opinions, but they can't argue with the facts. These people who are reducing themselves to petty, childish insults against you are showing their true colours and limits of their intelligence, in my opinion. Great show. Well, thank you for that. Speaking of insults against people, I've been criticised by TechPap51 on Twitter. He says, I'm disappointed in you, Peter. Earlier you belittled the texter about calling you fat. He said it was childish of him. Now you insult Secretary Bessent. This is Scott Bessent, the US Treasury Secretary, making fun of his teeth. We should all be as physically and intellectually perfect as you, I guess. Not a good look, mate. I'm not intellectually perfect by any stretch of the imagination. I have the most average of average university degrees, it must be said. And similarly, when it comes to teeth, I wish I had the money to have Scott Bessent's teeth. The point is that Scott Bessent has really quite astonishingly white and perfect teeth that I think are perhaps slightly too big for his mouth. If you see them on the screen now, if you're watching on the screen, or just Google it on your phone if you're at home listening on the radio or whatever, because they just seem a bit too big for his mouth. They just seem a little bit white, and he's decided to do that. I'm not criticising something he can't control, such as, I don't know, having a big nose or having small eyes or something like that. Obviously, I could control being fat if I had any personal control. But Scott Bessent has chosen those teeth. I think they've cost a lot of money, and I think they just don't look in nature. I'm sure he's a very good Treasury Secretary. Some might argue differently. Just on politicians, interesting story I think you should know about. The Liberal Democrats. Freddie Van Mierlo is a Liberal Democrat MP. He's an MP for Tenley and Tem, which is sort of Oxfordshire way. Freddie has decided, this Liberal Democrat MP has decided that there should be government action not on crime, the cost of living or the NHS, but on sourdough bread. Yes, really. You know that posh bread that people buy from places like Gale's Bakery? Freddie Van Mierlo, Liberal Democrat, asked Daniel Zeichner. Daniel Zeichner is the Food and Farming Minister. To ask him whether he has made a recent assessment of the potential merits of bringing forward regulations on the composition of bread marketed as sourdough. Have you ever in your life heard a more Liberal Democrat thing? Daniel Zeichner said the government has no current plans to introduce regulations to specifically cover the composition of sourdough bread. The UK maintains high food standards, including on requirements relating to food labelling and information. Existing legislation ensures the labelling and marketing of food, including sourdough products, does not intentionally mislead customers. These questions, these written questions to government ministers, including the one from Freddie Van Mierlo, do you know how much they cost you? Do you know how much they cost you, the taxpayer? £149. £149 each. That's the estimate of what it costs to answer one of those questions. All the civil servants, all the time needed behind the scenes in those government departments to answer that question about regulations that should be brought forward in Freddie Van Mierlo, Liberal Democrat MP's opinion on the composition of bread marketed as sourdough. £159, you could probably afford, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 loaves of sourdough at that point. Stay with us here on Talk. Lots to come.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of people getting in touch on a number of issues. Paul says, I'm quite amazed how you keep your cool. Keep it up, being rational, and perhaps ask the lawyer, this lawyer for the case that argues that Hamas shouldn't be a prescribed organisation, shouldn't be a terrorist organisation in UK law. He's coming up in a few minutes' time, so definitely stay tuned for that. And Paul says, maybe ask him why the terrorists won't release the remaining hostages, dead or alive, after 550 days so the war can stop. It is very simple. Angela says, I was disgusted at Jess Phillips' face in Parliament while the opposition read out the most shocking reports regarding grooming gangs' witness statements. Your guest is deluded. This is tit for tat political sound bites, talking about Danny Shaw earlier on. And one more from Rick, who says that this is a darn sight more than just poor presentation and communication. That is what Danny Shaw was partially arguing within that. Lots of people want to get in touch. Let's talk about gangs, rape gangs now, with Miranda from Cumbria. Miranda, thanks for giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say?
It was just about Mr. Shaw, who you were speaking to earlier on.
Yeah.
I also believe that his excuses about communication were just truly shocking. And I listened to Jess Phillips, and I think what she said was an absolute disgrace. And sometimes I think that politicians seem to latch on to a cause. And from what she said yesterday, it was a complete contradiction to what she'd previously said about, trying to be empathetic and, really considerate about women and girls, and with regards to a previous commitment of safety of women and girls.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether she should resign or whether she should come out and say basically who actually wrote the piece which she read out, whether it was a boss, Mr. Starmer, whether the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, had something to do with it. But essentially, when you listen to Katie Lamb's words, which were so powerful, and these were little girls, some of them were little girls who'd been abused, I was truly shocked. And I think there should be a judicial inquiry, and I think everybody who knew should be made to come up. A judge should force them to stand and give pieces of evidence. And I think no matter how high it goes, there should be prison sentences for senior police officers, for social workers. It's just truly shocking. And it was really upsetting yesterday. When Katie Lamb stood up and she said what she said, it was, I'd never realised. And you just think, oh my word, just awful. And little girls, think, oh my word.
It's still ongoing, Miranda, as well. One of the people who looked into this in a previous inquiry said it's an epidemic, and said that things like this are still happening today. And I've spoken to people on this programme and other programmes who have told me that very little has changed. In fact, in some cases, it's got worse in some areas of the country, and that I find really, really worrying. And I wonder why there is a reluctance not to absolutely throw the book at these people and to have a root and branch inquiry in whatever form that is, to get to the bottom of this and to stop it happening. Because if the police were doing their job, and if people weren't looking the other way and weren't using excuses like, oh, it's a cultural issue, bit too difficult, not going to get involved, well, this wouldn't happen, and children would not be being raped.
No, I mean, there's nothing cultural about it at all. Rape is rape is rape. There are no excuses that can be made for it, no matter where you're from, whether you're from an elite family. And the thing is, I don't think a lot of these politicians and the head of the CPS and the Department of Public Prosecution, they're too detached from reality. And if it was on their doorstep, if it was one of theirs, I think it would be completely different. But it's not. They treat people as minions, as underclass, and they don't. They know that it's happening, but they just don't care. It's about caring, and they don't care. And whether it's to do with votes or not, that should be irrelevant. And I think what Katie Lamb said it is irrelevant. These are children, and it's just horrific. It really is. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Miranda, you've spoken very powerfully there, and I thank you for your call. I really thank you for it. You've said it far better than I think any politician has, even Katie Lamb, in the last few days. You've just spoken from the heart there, and thank you for your call. I really appreciate it. I want to talk to Graham in Peterborough. as well, who has given me a ring on this, 0344 499 1000. Graham, what would you like to say?
Well, I'd like to say that the West Yorkshire police record, using a predominantly white police force in turning a blind eye to what was going on, is absolutely exemplary. Now, do the police commanders think that by recruiting and grading the police forces or policemen that they want in their force by ethnicity will change anything?
Yeah. It's a very fair point.
You see in certain countries where, just turn a blind eye, just nothing to see here, is the norm.
And it's often not based on race. In fact, what we've seen with the rape gangs problem is often the fact that there are people of other ethnicities who say, oh, I don't understand that culture, therefore I'm not going to investigate it. Well, there's right and wrong, and it's really straightforward. And I don't care what the cultural issue is. If something is wrong and illegal, it should be pursued to the nth degree, Graham. It's pretty straightforward as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, it's as plain as the nose on your face. I think what the West Yorkshire police have done is criminal.
Yeah. Well, I just don't see how it's legal. And that's the big issue. This is the issue particularly of the West Yorkshire police saying that they can essentially discriminate against white people because they're saying that people of ethnic minorities can apply for jobs beforehand, and there's a small window in which white people can apply. If there's a problem with ethnicity, how would you solve it, Graham? If you're going to say, right, I think we all agree most police forces should have the best people in there. They should largely look like the area that they police in some way. But I just don't think that because you're necessarily of a race or a sexuality or a background, that you will then be a better or worse police officer necessarily. It's down to the individual, isn't it?
You need the best of the best of the best to do the job. We have to sort of turn back the clock and get ex-military, ex-service people, people that just want to do the best they can. None of this sort of police college nutcase.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are really, really unhappy with the College of Police. And Graham, thanks for your thoughts on that. I appreciate that. Garfield is in Derbyshire. Not taking a nap this afternoon like his namesake, the cat. Garfield, you want to talk about migrants, I think. What would you like to say?
Yeah, well, I'll solve that problem. I'll tell you how to stop the gangs and the people coming in. And then I'll tell you how to stop this disgusting behaviour.
Go for it, Garfield.
With these children. So I'll tell you the first one. Right, I'm going to have to ask a question to go on to the... We've had 6,000 migrants come in, maybe more now, since...
this year, 6,642 this year,
how many more border agency staff have these set on, and how many immigration lawyers have jumped on the bandwagon?
Probably quite a few. I don't know the exact number, but probably quite a few immigration lawyers anyway.
So here's the way to stop it. It sounds a bit extreme. Stop everybody coming in, even the legal ones, people coming to work, family members. Stop it for 12 months and get the border force agencies, the police and everybody targeted the criminal gangs and what they call it.
But Garfield, there are loads of people, I can understand on the illegal side of things why you would want to do that, but there are loads of people who come here legally, to study, to work. You'd stop them as well?
Yeah, for 12 months while we stop this thing. It's to be cruel to be kind, yes. Okay. You'd have to stop it, and then that frees up, because the government aren't going to set any more border for it. All they'll do is get a load more immigration lawyers. And with the grooming gangs, it's taken all this time to actually bring a proper name to it. They are rape gangs, they're not grooming gangs. Yep. Grooming isn't against the law. Where the law...
It is in some ways, but I agree with you that, that rape gangs are... It's a much more accurate description, because that's what they're doing. They're raping children.
Yeah, well, what happens is the law is that if you're transporting children for other people, that becomes a criminal offence then. That's how they manage to catch them.
Okay.
They're procuring them for other people, taking them to hotels, paying their living off immorally.
Okay.
So the thing to do is that whichever country they're from, there are, has been mentioned, quite a few from Muslim countries.
Yeah.
So all we need to do is, at the moment, when you build a new mosque, there's no rates on a mosque or a church, which is thing.
But it's interesting, Garfield, as well, that we do have a situation where people involved in those gangs are not always immigrants as well. There are people who are sometimes born in this country. We're just going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, Garfield, because we do need to do the sport before 6 o'clock. But it's a really important topic, and I will give it more time, of course, in the 6 o'clock hour. We're also going to be talking to one of the lawyers involved in that case in regard to Hamas. They're saying that Hamas should not be thought of in UK law as a terrorist organisation. So we'll do that. We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the sport in just a second here on Talk.
We should have racist policies for hiring police because these people come to this country and don't learn English. Doesn't seem the right priority at all.
Julia, it's not racist. It's perfectly legal under the Equalities Act 2010 to have positive action.
It's racist. It might be legally racist, but it's racist.
Well, how is it racist, Julia? Giving somebody else, giving them the opportunity to apply, helping them.
If you discriminate between people based on the colour of their skin, that's racism.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Gavin has sent us a voice note. You can send it through the same way as you usually send a voice note to anybody else, 0344 499 1000 on WhatsApp. This is what Gavin has to say.
I'm listening to this about discrimination. I was in South Africa, in an African country, and I was discriminated because I was white. So I wasn't allowed to get certain jobs. Now I come to a European country, or I come to the UK, and I'm discriminated because I'm white. Where can I go where I'm not discriminated because I'm white? When is enough enough?
Gavin, thanks for that. It's a very good question. Beautiful accent, by the way. Make me feel reminiscing from my days on my gap year working as a reporter on the Cape Argus in Cape Town. Learned an awful lot there. In fact, I had a news editor who was absolutely brilliant. She'd seen everything, done everything, been right around the world. Slightly intimidating. And there was a young reporter who was asking her one time, said, Vivian, his name was Vivian, said, Vivian, everyone in this newsroom is gossiping about my love life. And Vivian, who barely looked up from her screen, just said, our business is information. Go and sit down. Now it's time for the
Sport Summary on Talk.
And I'm delighted Max Scott is here, TalkSport presenter. Hiya, Max, you all right?
I'm very well. How are you, Peter?
I'm very well, thanks. A bad night in the Champions League for Aston Villa. Were they undone by the best team in the tournament, do you think?
Well, I think I would have said that if it wasn't for the previous evening where Arsenal beat Real Madrid 3-0. I mean, I think for Arsenal, it was almost like a coming-of-age evening. So I would have agreed with that sentiment 24 hours earlier. But I think having said that, we've got to take into the account, have a little bit of sort of grace for Aston Villa, who only a few seasons ago were saved from relegation on the final day of the season, and here they are in the quarterfinals of the Champions League with a world-class squad. And I just think at this point, and this is no disrespect to Aston Villa, I think they found their level. We're talking about a PSG side without Kylian Mbappe, arguably the best player in the world. He's gone to Real Madrid, and they've found a new groove and a new niche, and they look to be one of the most formidable sides in Europe, and you might as well say in world football, because European football is the pinnacle. And so it's having said that, though, when the reverse leg at Villa Park is going to be different gravy in terms of atmosphere. And one thing I would say, I just want to point this out, I don't know if you saw the clips of Prince William before the game speaking to TalkSport's very own Alan McCoist in the tunnel. As a pundit, I'm a sports broadcaster myself, as a pundit, he was unbelievable.
Can you get him a few shifts on TalkSport, perhaps?
Maybe we're not as highbrow as he might want, but
well, his brow is very high. It doesn't have very much. Doesn't have very much brow. Listen, I've been arguing to our boss Danny Morris, the Ayatollah of audio, for ages, that I should be a commentator on TalkSport. For some reason, he hasn't taken me up on that offer. Don't know why. It's a big night for Man United and Spurs, who have struggled this season in the Premier League, but the Europa League could bring them joy. Tell us about who they're playing.
It could bring them joy. I mean, Spurs and United have been a total mess this season, let's be honest. It's been awful for them. They're in the bottom half of the table. They're closer to relegation than they are anything else in the Premier League. For both Ruben Amorim at United and Ange Postecoglou at Spurs, their respective Europa League clashes against Lyon and then against Frankfurt, it's sort of do or die. And it's so important for them, because if you win the Europa League, you get qualification for the Champions League, which of course is the top table of European football, and the revenue it brings, particularly for United. We have, strangely, Sir Jim Ratcliffe in an interview with Gary Neville saying that the club is running out of cash, and then the next day announcing plans for a £2 billion stadium to be built in the middle of Manchester. But having said that, if they are so poor as they claim to be, getting Champions League football is so important for just
and for Glasgow Rangers as well. Don't forget they're in the contest as well.
Absolutely. I mean, it is wide open, and funnily enough, United and Spurs are bookies' favourites in this country. But when you really look at it on form and on class, I think both United and Spurs are really going to struggle. But I don't support either of those teams. But as an Englishman, I want to see an English team win any European competition. I don't hold, unless it's Derby County. I'm a Forest fan, but they're nowhere near that, so we don't have to worry about it. I think they're
up
really
the Rams, I say. Let's go from big balls to small balls.
Yeah.
It's golf. It's a big weekend. The top players heading to Augusta for the Masters. Tell us about this event.
Well, it's the most prestigious event in golf. I don't really watch golf. I hardly play it. I can barely, I'd call it a golf racket if I knew any better. I can barely swing a club. But there's something special about it, and I'm glued to it. And of course, what makes it even more of a captivating narrative is Rory McIlroy. Can he finally get that Grand Slam, that career Grand Slam? It's eluded him at Augusta for all of his career, and he's not won a major for 11 years. But he's come into this Augusta Masters in the best form of his life, and he's been talking about how he's been winding down. You might have heard he's winding down, trying to shut out the noise by watching Bridgerton on Netflix with his wife. So we'll see if that works and helps break.
He also gave a good interview about how his daughter gets him to read a book about an owl because she finds it really funny how he says the word owl, which you would say as...
I'd say owl.
Yeah, whereas people from Northern Ireland say owl.
Owl.
Yeah, yeah. I usually also sometimes in broadcasting I talk about sound. I usually just say audio.
What about mirror?
Mirror. Yeah. I had
an ex-girlfriend who's Northern Irish, so I've got it down to a T.
That's not a bad impersonation at all. Also, I don't want to end this hour on a sour note, so we'll end it on a sourdough note. Thank you to Pete, who says, good afternoon, sourdough is lovely. It's only £2.85 in Waitrose and full of Haldiki olives. £2.85 for a loaf of bread. That's quite a lot, Pete. We're going to talk to one of the lawyers in just a few minutes who is representing Hamas in a case against the Home Office. They are arguing that Hamas are not terrorists and shouldn't be a prescribed organisation. We will talk to that lawyer in just a few minutes after the news here on Talk. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. We're going to be talking in a second about Hamas using the European Convention on Human Rights to challenge its status as a terrorist grouping in the UK. It's a prescribed group. We'll talk to one of the barristers who is behind the case against the Home Office. We'll talk to him in just a second. We're also going to talk this hour about bobbies on the beat. Should they be more on the beat or should they lose their funding? That's something that Keir Starmer is talking about, and about diversity in West Midlands Police. They are certainly under pressure at the moment because there is some evidence that they are discriminating against white people. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. We'll also talk about the Birmingham Labour MP who took a luxury Japan trip during the bin strike. Maybe you're in Birmingham, maybe you're suffering with what's happening with the bins. There are lots of other issues that we're talking about today, including sourdough bread. So if you want to get your voice on the air, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call between now and 7. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter. And remember, there are 3 ways you can use the main number, and that is to send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Plenty of time to get your voice on the air between now and 7 on any of the topics we're discussing this evening here on Talk Drive. Well, the main story we're talking about on Talk Drive today is Hamas using the European Convention on Human Rights to challenge its prescription as a terrorist organisation in the UK. One of the barristers behind that at Garden Court Chambers is Frank McGuinness, who joins me now. Frank, good evening.
Good evening. Good day, Martatu. How are you?
Tell me, Frank, I don't want to mischaracterise this. This case, to me anyway, and tell me if I'm wrong, is specifically saying that Hamas should not be prescribed as a terrorist organisation in the UK.
Yes, that's right. It's not a case yet, is it? It's an application, and it's for the Secretary of State to decide it one way or the other. And if she decides that she doesn't want to deprescribe, then it becomes a case if my client, Hamas, decides to appeal that decision to the judiciary.
Have you we hear about barristers taking cases on the taxi rank and so on, especially in criminal cases. Have you decided to take this case?
What do you mean?
Has it been your decision to take this case? You've been instructed and you've decided to take the case?
Who else would have decided to take the case? I don't understand. So of course I decide what cases I take.
How do you sleep at night?
That's a baffling question because, I mean, do you want me to answer that question? I will if you want.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas are terrorists, aren't they? It's so unbelievably clear.
All right, so I'm going to answer your question. You shouldn't have asked it, but I will answer your question.
I shouldn't have asked it. We have this thing called free speech in this country, so I can ask whatever I like. Perhaps you can answer it.
I will answer the question. It's just you're talking over me. Did you want to hear my answer?
Yeah.
All right. I need you to listen to my answer very carefully because what you've done is extremely dangerous and you shouldn't have asked that question, all right? So please do listen to my response, and when I'm done, I'll say next question, all right? You have just asked me, how do I sleep at night? And what you're trying to do by saying that is you're trying to fix me, you're trying to associate me with my client. There is a very well-established
representing them, Frank. You're representing them. You've decided to this is a conversation. I'm not going to be told whether I can talk or not talk. You've decided to represent them.
So you've invited me to talk over me because you're afraid of what I have to say, is that right?
I'm not afraid of what you have to say, but you're saying that I'm associating you with them.
You seem afraid. You seem afraid.
Afraid? We're having a conversation, and I'm asking you...
Well, at the bar, we tend to let each other speak. Is that not the convention?
I'm not a barrister, I'm an interviewer, and you're saying that I'm associating you with your client. You have told me that you have decided to represent Hamas. They are an unspeakably horrific and dreadful organisation.
Oh,
so yes, I am associating you with them, because you've decided to represent them.
Okay, I think you might be hearing from the police. I mean, I don't know, but it sounds like you might, because the point is that, you know, the low point of this on this side of the Irish Sea was Boris Johnson and Priti Patel using the phrase activist lawyers. They knew what they were doing. They were using it to stoke anti-migrant racism. And then a man showed up with a knife at the law firm, calling by name for a solicitor who I know because they put a target on his back. And the low point on the Irish side of the Irish Sea is Pat Finucane, of course, right? A British MP stood up in Parliament and said he's just like his clients. Pat Finucane represented members of the Provisional IRA, which is another proscribed organisation. And 3 weeks later, Pat Finucane was, of course, murdered in front of his family by loyalist paramilitaries who we now know had handlers in the British establishment. So you're playing the same game. Don't talk over me.
Let's talk about Hamas. I'll talk over you if you want to. No, excuse me.
You're playing the same game. You put
I'm not playing any games. I'm not playing any games.
You just put a target on my back.
I'm not putting a target on anybody's back. I am asking you. No, I don't.
You owe me an apology.
No, I don't. I'm asking you why you've decided. Why have you decided to represent Hamas?
Next question.
Why have you decided to represent Hamas?
Did you not hear me say next question? I'm not answering your question.
You're not answering the question about why you've decided to represent Hamas.
You're trying to make this a story about me. Talk about the application.
You have decided to represent Hamas. I think people are interested as to why you've decided to do that, because they're
You're trying to make me the story.
They're a terrorist organisation.
You're deliberately putting a target on my back.
I'm absolutely not doing that. I'm asking you
if there are negative consequences, I'm holding you personally responsible.
I'm asking you a perfectly relevant and reasonable question, which is why have you decided to represent Hamas when you did not have to do that?
Let's talk about how there's a crisis of Zionism because it's committing a genocide. Do you agree that Israel's committing a genocide?
No.
So if I'm right that it is, and if South Africa's government is right that it is, that would make you a genocide denier, would it? Is that what you are? You deny genocide, do you?
We've gone very, very quickly from me asking you a perfectly reasonable question, which you're refusing to answer, to you alleging that I'm a genocide denier, which I would argue is defamatory.
You literally denied the genocide. It's not defamatory, mate.
I'm not denying it. I'm not denying it. It is not a genocide.
Yeah, so if I said if I'm right,
it is factually not. Well, you're tying yourself up in knots. I would ask the question again: why have you decided to represent Hamas?
Well, there's lots of ways to answer that question. the obvious answer is to say that we're witnessing a terminal crisis of Zionism and that Israel's apartheid state is collapsing in front of our eyes. And that raises difficult questions for the Secretary of State about what will happen if and when Israel goes the way of South Africa. South African apartheid, of course, collapsed in 1994. And as the Irish example, right, the Provisional IRA was, of course, an illegal organisation, and yet its political wing started winning elections. In the South African example, the British government, of course, called for Mandela to be executed. That's what they wanted, and he's now regarded as a hero, right? So he was maligned as a terrorist. And whatever people think of Hamas, and of course, a lot of people will oppose what Hamas stand for and what they've done. The point about this application is to say you don't have to support a prescribed organisation to think that it shouldn't be prescribed. If people want to read the arguments that the application is based on, they can go to the website.
Perhaps you could tell us why you don't think Hamas should be a prescribed organisation.
The documents have been uploaded to, so hamascase.com has all of the pleadings if people are interested to read those
perhaps you could
documents.
summarise them for us now and tell us your belief why you don't think Hamas should be a prescribed organisation.
Well, it's not about my belief. I'm a lawyer instructed to make some legal arguments, which is what I've done, along with my colleagues. And it's not possible to understand the application without understanding the broader context. It's, as I've said, we're witnessing the collapse of an apartheid regime, and that means that extraordinary things will happen in those extraordinary circumstances. And that's why my client has taken this extraordinary step to approach the British Home Secretary and to say, look, there are a number of reasons why the Terrorism Act should no longer be applied to this organisation.
I think there are a number of people who will find it absolutely extraordinary that there is anyone who believes and anyone who would represent an organisation who is putting forward the argument legally that Hamas isn't a terrorist organisation and shouldn't be prescribed.
That's interesting. So you're saying that you think Hamas shouldn't be entitled to legal representation?
I'm saying that they're a terrorist organisation who have done absolutely horrendous things, and I don't want them anywhere near my country. I'm happy that they're prescribed. I'm happy that there's documented evidence of what they have done. And also, if you don't want to be a prescribed organisation, why not, I would say to Hamas, release the 59 hostages who are currently in Gaza?
So you're saying that people who take hostages should be prescribed organisations?
I'm saying that Hamas should be a prescribed organisation because it is taking hostages. I haven't mentioned anybody else or any other, or Israel or any other aspect of this. I'm talking about Hamas itself. I'm not talking about whataboutery. I'm talking about Hamas, which is a terrorist organisation that I think should be prescribed.
Well, look, okay, that's interesting. The point is that the definition of terrorism in the Terrorism Act 2000 is very broad, and basically almost any organisation that's using violence to commit a political purpose to advance a political purpose is caught by that definition, right? So the Ukrainian forces in their war against Russia, they would be caught by the definition. Israel, of course, would be caught by the definition. So what that means legally
You've also
is
said that the British Armed Forces would be covered by the definition. So it is the contention of your action that the British Armed Forces should be deemed a terrorist organisation. Is that correct?
No, you've misunderstood. What I'm saying.
Explain it to me.
Yeah, I'm trying to. So this is my point, right? The definition of terrorism in the Act is extremely broad, and most organisations like the ones you just mentioned, the ones I was mentioning, are caught by it. And what that means is the Secretary of State has an extremely broad discretion to decide who she wants to add to that list. Of course, this organisation, the political wing of Hamas, was added to the list of prescribed organisations in 2021. The military wing was added more than 2 decades ago. And so because that discretion is so broad, what we're saying is that there are ways to legally challenge the exercise of the discretion in this case. And all we've done is to set out some entirely sensible, thoughtful, well-reasoned arguments about why the time has come for the Secretary of State to revisit the decision of her predecessor, Priti Patel, who was, of course, politically compromised and highly criticised for her dealings with the apartheid state of Israel, and to consider, of course, the position in international law, which confirms that people like Palestinians who are under occupation, I mean, this is a settled position in international law that people under occupation have a right to use armed force to resist. So Palestinians have a right to pick.
Am I getting it clear, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you believe that Hamas have a right to use armed force to represent their position?
You keep asking me what I believe, which again is it's not quite as blatant and disgusting as your previous question. But
what's interesting
it's not about
is
what I
that
believe.
Hamas. I mean, you're representing these people, and you've chosen to do so. So presumably, it has something to do with what you believe.
Do you not understand how the legal system works?
Yes, I do, and I understand that you didn't have to take the case. If I were a lawyer and if someone came to me, I would say there's not in a million years would I represent Hamas. They are a disgusting, horrendous, anti-Semitic, dreadful terrorist organisation. That's what I would say. You didn't say that, and I'm very interested as to why.
Because you're trying to make the story about me instead of this important application because you're not a serious journalist. Is that right?
The hour of judgment shall not come until the Muslims fight the Jews and kill them. So what the Jews hide behind trees and stones, and each tree and stone will say, O Muslim, O servant of Allah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him, except for for a specific tree, which is the tree of Jews. There is no solution for the Palestinian question except through jihad. That is what Hamas believe, and I would not represent an organisation that believed that, and you have chosen to.
Where's that quote from?
The first one is from the Hamas Charter Article 7, and the second one is from Hamas Charter Article 13.
Which year was that charter passed in?
I don't have it in front of me.
You don't know, do you? You're out of your depth, aren't you?
Out of my depth, right. Well, I'll tell you what Ismail Haniyeh said.
You're quoting a document from 1988, right? And it's clear that that document has been widely criticised.
So
Hamas
doesn't want to kill Jews then? Hamas doesn't want to destroy the state of Israel? Is that what you're saying?
Let me just respond. So that document you're referring to is the 1988 Charter. I know you don't know what you're talking about, which is fine. You're allowed to be a bit out of your depth. There's 600 pages of supporting evidence in this application, and you've not had a chance to read it. I, of course, have worked on it extensively. So it's fair enough that there's an asymmetry here. Like, I'm not trying to trick you. It's just you're quoting a document that's more than 30 years out of date.
Well, let me tell you what was said in 2023 by Ismail Haniyeh. Let me tell you what the Hamas senior leader Ismail Haniyeh said of the loss of civilian life in Gaza.
Perhaps you're deliberately misleading your viewers. Have you read?
I don't think any of my viewers are under any misapprehension about what Hamas stands for. I don't think you're under any misapprehension.
You just misled them. You didn't tell them about the 2017 Charter. Why didn't you? Because you don't know what you're talking about.
On the 26th of October,
it's okay to admit that you're ignorant. That's fine.
On the 26th of October, the Hamas senior leader Ismail Haniyeh, commenting on the loss of civilian life in Gaza, said, "The blood of the women, children and elderly, we are the ones who need this blood, so it awakens within us the revolutionary spirit." We also have Ghazi Hamid on the 24th of October 2023 saying that he would repeat the 7th of October attacks time and again until Israel is annihilated. I don't see a huge difference between that and what was said in 1988, I must say.
What became of Ismail Haniyeh?
Well, we know what became of him because Israel assassinated him.
All right. All of these things are addressed extensively in the application. It's of course correct that Hamas should have to answer to things that they say and do, and they do extensively in the application. I encourage people to read it. It will cast light on the subject in a way that you're not even pretending to do. You're not trying to have a dialogue with me about what's actually happening. You're talking across me and trying to present. How would you
characterise what Hamas is doing, if not terrorism? How would you characterise it?
Well, the whole point that's being made in the argument, in the application, is that the definition of terrorism is extremely broad. And so basically any organisation that thinks that their strategy is best advanced by the use of armed struggle will be caught by that definition. That's a central part of the whole application. Does that make sense?
It does make perfect sense to me, but what I would wonder is how you can argue that Hamas isn't a terrorist organisation if the definition is so broad.
Well, by that logic, Israel's a terrorist organisation. Do you agree?
No.
Well, think about it. Come on, man, think it through. If you agree the definition is very, very broad, then the Secretary of State could say, right, clearly it applies to Israel.
But she said it about Hamas, but you're arguing the counter to this.
Violent. I'm going to say that the IDF is a terrorist organisation. She could do that if she wanted. She literally could. Why shouldn't she? They're doing a genocide.
Why shouldn't she? It's not a genocide. It is factually not a genocide.
Well, the South African government, the Irish government, the Spanish government, the Belgian government disagrees with you. Oh, you know better than them, do you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're wrong. They're wrong.
All right. Who asked you? What do you know? You obviously don't. You're out of your depth. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. I think the phenomenal submissions that we saw in the South African genocide case are far more persuasive than any of the sort of ridiculous talking points that you're propagating here. It's okay, mate. You're allowed to not know what you're talking about, but why don't you just admit it to your viewers? You don't know what you're talking about. You're out of your depth. Everyone can see it.
Frank, thanks for your help. That's Frank McGuinness there. He's a barrister at Garden Court Chambers. He's one of the lawyers behind the case that is arguing that Hamas are not terrorists and should be de-prescribed. What do you think of what he has to say? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
it is good news that we have theme parks, that we can attract investment from around the world. There's no question about that. And I say that with relatives who live literally across the road from the site where that theme park's due to be built. They've not been ringing me up with vast enthusiasm, but having said that, investment is good. We shouldn't deride it, whatever it may happen to be. As you say, it may well be very costly, but it's better here than it would be if it was in France or Germany.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, that was tense, wasn't it? Had a little sip of Diet Coke after that one, let me tell you. Robert's given me a shout, 0344 499 1000. Robert, what would you like to say?
Hi, listening to that gentleman, I'm impressed that you didn't start having a real bad go at him and getting very irate with him.
My view, Robert, is that people reveal themselves, and you don't need to rant at them. You can actually just let them go and say what they need to say.
Yeah, I think the best person to counter his argument is a lady called Natasha Hausendorf. She is the Israeli version of what he is. And she's a British lady. She represents a pro-Israel view, and she's very good and very well spoken. In fact,
I think I've interviewed her before, Robert, if I remember correctly. She's a very, very impressive person, certainly. It's interesting, there's a barrister I know who has been in touch and says this barrister says, in my view, that barrister was unprofessional. Now, I'll leave that up to other people to decide, but this barrister who I know has just messaged me to say he should have come on to discuss the application instead of telling people just to look it up. I mean, I did want to know not only what his reasons were, but also why he's decided to represent Hamas. He said it's all about me. I mean, or I was making it all about him. I mean, that was the law firm that put out a video a little bit earlier on with the three barristers who are putting this together, so I'm not sure how it's not about them, especially as they're involved with it, Robert.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you just have to look at the charter of Hamas, as you say. They are a terrorist organisation, but they are supported and funded by the Iranian regime, whose end game is to get rid of Israel, every Jew not just in Israel, in the world. And once they finish with every Jew in the world, go after every Christian in the world. And
Robert, you're right, and I think Hamas are a terrorist organisation. They're an awful, horrendous group of people who perpetrated the 7th of October. If I were a lawyer, I would not choose to represent them. In fact, I would do everything I could not to represent them. In fact, I would oppose them if I could. Robert, thanks for your call. We'll leave this for a second, but if you do want to give me a call on it, we have time between now and 7, 0344 499 1000. I want to talk about this story about Keir Starmer putting bobbies on the beat, and he says that if certain parts of the country don't do it, well, then they will lose cash. And Starmer has spoken to police forces about that. Graham Wesson is a former police officer and author of How to Be a Police Officer. Graham, this whole notion, this whole notion, I should say, of neighbourhood policing, does it work? Is that something? I mean, people want to see bobbies on the beat, but does it actually work? Does it help bring crime levels down? Because that's what everybody wants to see.
Yeah, evening, Peter. It does work, but it has to work in balance with response policing as well. The public basically want officers when they need them, when there's an emergency going on. So they dial 999. That's when they really want the police to turn up. It's reassuring to see your community officers, and community teams can do an excellent work and have had some fantastic results when they're properly resourced and funded, and they can actually pay attention and actually work the community they're in. Don't forget that many police stations and police buildings have been sold. So officers are now having to travel even further to get to these community beats, which is one issue. So you're taking hours out of their days when they're now travelling to their community to work. So that reduces the time. But if they're given the resources and the time to actually go in and build trust and confidence, and police forces can retain those officers in those roles, they can be very effective. You know, back when I started policing, we had officers that worked their local beats, their local communities for many years, and they were literally a font of all knowledge and information about that area.
Well, I think that, you know, there's a lot in that, Graham, and I think there are a lot of people worried about crime in their area. They're worried about the practicalities of crime. They're worried about whether police officers will come out. I mean, having a named officer and these 1,300 extra officers, I think there are a few questions about where they're actually going to come from.
There's a lot of questions about the numbers. I think you have to almost I'd like to be a bit of an optimist. It's a small step, very small step, towards resourcing community teams again and providing some reassurance to the public. The public like having community officers that they know and can contact. Whether it's going to be one named officer or a team, I'd question. The numbers being bandied around today by the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, I think it's something like 13,000 in 4 years. And whether that's across all 43 police forces remains to be seen. I think I heard another stat about 3,000 in the first year. Again, is that across 43 police forces? Because that's a very thin spread of numbers then when you're looking at where you're going to apply those numbers. So, you know, I think there needs to be some honesty and managing expectations of the public here. This isn't an instant fix. It sounds like it's over a long period of time, small numbers and maybe some small results.
I think you're absolutely right. Can I ask you about West Yorkshire Police? Because they are blocking white applicants to boost diversity. They're saying that they can't apply for jobs until much later in the process than people from other ethnic groupings. Isn't that just racism?
It sounds a perverse decision to me, and I think some senior leaders and some managers in policing almost lose what diversity is. Diversity is a strength in policing. But diversity covers age, gender, sexuality, nationality, so many diverse skills and abilities. That's where policing gets its strength from. If you speak to most teams of police officers, they welcome the diversity that each team has, because one of your basic skills in policing is the ability to communicate to everybody, finding some common ground to speak to people, be them a victim of crime or even a suspect. Diversity shouldn't just be about ethnicity. And I think that's where I can't understand this decision by West Yorkshire. They should be actually recruiting the best people for the job. All police officers want next to them is someone who's competent, capable and committed to do the job. Yeah. I never minded what ethnicity, gender, age the person was with me, but just were they competent and capable and ready to commit to do the job with me.
Tell me about the Notting Hill Carnival, because we know that one person was murdered, 8 people were stabbed, 50 police officers injured, and now a thug has been found guilty of murdering a young mother in front of her child at last year's festival. This is Shaquille Taboo, who is 20, was convicted this week of the brutal stabbing of 32-year-old Cher Maximin, who was caught in a violent clash during the 2024 Carnival alongside her 3-year-old daughter. There are calls still for the Notting Hill Carnival to be scrapped.
Well, I don't know about scrapped. I'd seriously, it outgrew itself years ago. When I was policing Carnival in the 80s, the 90s, early 2000s, it felt like it outgrown its location then. Great idea to have it when it first started, but there are so many people going now. There are so many tight London streets in and around West London, Notting Hill, West Kensington, under Trellick Tower. The whole area isn't conducive to having those large crowds and the vehicles travelling around it. I think it needs to be moved to somewhere that is more or better located, better placed, and better resourced to deal with the amount of people that are turning up there. Because the area where it is now isn't. It doesn't surprise me that crime keeps happening at Carnival, because for me it's in completely the wrong location, and I think it needs to be reviewed. If it was any other event and you were risk assessing it, it wouldn't be allowed to take place.
Graham, thank you for your thoughts this evening. Graham Whetone there, former police officer, author of How to Be a Police Officer. Lots of people getting in touch, perhaps unsurprisingly, about my interview with Frank McGuinness. They're one of the barristers who is involved in the case representing Hamas. And yeah, quite a few nice messages. I'll perhaps not read them out. But one person says, unbelievable, he lost the argument when he started with a personal insult. What an idiot. Ed says, what a horrible, aggressive little man, unfortunately portraying everything that's wrong with the world. Lee says he's your typical shouty lefty lawyer. They can't debate without a personal attack. Yeah, lots and lots of people in touch with thoughts like that. Chris in Brighton, interesting one, he says, regarding your interview, I do not agree with your defence of Israel, nor do I agree with the actions of Hamas. However, I do applaud you having contrary voices and viewpoints on your show, no matter how distasteful some may find them. This is in contrast to the boring, predictable, one-sided monoculture we get elsewhere in the media, says Chris in Brighton. Yes, as I was saying to the lawyer who wasn't allowing me to speak at various points, we have this thing called free speech in this country. Michael is in Taunton and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Michael, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Thanks for the show, and just well done for sticking with that guy. So I listen to a lot of radio and watch a lot of stuff on the telly as well. I've never heard a guy so rude and arrogant like that, and he's a barrister to boot.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And I would say, and this is another reason why we shouldn't be in the ECHR.
I think a lot of people feel that way because it is on human rights grounds, and even using we didn't even get into that in the interview. I mean, even using human rights and Hamas in the same sentence. I mean, they just have no regard for the human rights of Israelis. They have no regard for the 59 innocent people they have, and 250 they took, the people they murdered, and so on. And yet, on human rights grounds, that is part of this action. It's not a case yet, as the lawyer correctly said.
They don't even have any respect or care for their own people, who they just human shields, as we well know. If our Home Secretary allows this, the ramifications are enormous and disgusting, actually, as well. It should be thrown out. It shouldn't. If we had our human rights, it shouldn't even be allowed. I would go as far as to say, if I had the power and the authority, I would disbar this man and this legal team from ever practicing in the United Kingdom.
Well, listen, he's entitled to work. He's entitled to make a living, and if people instruct him, he's entitled to represent them. And actually, the free speech we have in this country is something that I think, it doesn't exist in places where Hamas is in power. Like, it doesn't exist in Gaza.
I understand that, Peter, but would we allow Nazi groups to do this and represent? Because this is an evil that even, in my opinion, goes below the Nazis and the like.
Okay.
And to allow this makes a mockery of our democracy and our mercy and our good nature, where we're too soft, and differentiating between giving a voice to creatures of monstrosity.
Okay, Michael, thanks for your thoughts. Sorry, we'll just have to leave it there because we do have to go to a break, but thank you very much for your points. And thanks to everybody who's been supportive. It was a tough interview, I'll be totally honest with you. My mouth was going dry at points. It wasn't a pleasant experience for me, but I felt that some of the questions I was asking him, and I was quite tough on Frank McGuinness, and fair dues to him for coming on a station that he probably knew was going to be asking him some hostile questions. But I think those questions did need to be asked, and it was a very, very testy interview. But I'm glad this station, and I'm proud to work for a station that would broadcast that and would allow me the freedom to do that, and I allowed him freedom to talk as well. He talked about suing me at one point. We'll see if that actually happens. I'm not sure how I broke the law by exercising free speech, but anyway, listen, we'll see what happens with that. In a moment, we're going to talk about the Birmingham MP who took a holiday to a luxury trip to Japan during the bin strike. Maybe he should have been at home trying to sort out the problems there. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now then, let's talk about Birmingham, where if you are there, you're probably likely looking out on the vista in front of your home and seeing a big pile of rubbish and a big pile of mounting rubbish in bin bags, because this is something that is affecting so many people in what some people argue is Britain's second city. I'm sure there are many people in Manchester who would not be happy with that. But a senior Labour MP, this is Liam Byrne. Do you remember the one who was Chief Secretary to the Treasury under the Gordon Brown government, who left the note saying there is no money left? That's the one, or no, I think it was I'm afraid there is no money. So he has been accused of abandoning his constituents by taking a luxury trip to Japan during the Birmingham bin crisis. He's the MP for Birmingham, Hodge Hill and Solihull North. He flew to Tokyo with the House of Commons Business Committee 2 weeks after the strikes broke out, and his constituents are said to be some of the worst affected by the bin strikes. He flew business class apparently to Tokyo, stayed at the Hotel New Otani, a 5-star establishment with 37 bars and restaurants and 33 banquet rooms. Apparently they dined at the Gonpachi Nishi Azabu restaurant, where a bottle of wine is said to fetch over £650. Well then, let's talk to one local MP in the area who is certainly 5-star. That is Wendy Morton. She is the MP for Aldridge Brownhills in the West Midlands. Wendy is a shadow foreign minister. Presumably you weren't on the Tokyo trip, Wendy?
I was not on the Tokyo trip. I was definitely here in the UK, and I'm actually in my constituency at the moment, which is on the edge of Birmingham. Yes,
indeed. And here we have Liam Byrne, who was so unpopular when he was at the Treasury. His nickname was Voldemort, a spokesman for him saying there were no votes that week and private travel was personally funded. Since Friday, Mr Byrne has anchored the major launch of the committee's draft report on the UK-EU reset, held informal meetings with Japanese business investing in Britain, set out a 5-point roadmap for managing tariffs, engaged with ministers in the latest Post Office Horizon data, briefed the chair of the liaison committee on questions on steel and tariffs for the Prime Minister, and with his committee teams designed the inquiry sessions for the new inquiry on economic security. On the constituency front, he took meetings with the local government minister, Jim McMahon, city council leaders and MPs to urge resolution of the bin strike, called again for the city and unions to resolve the dispute, and deployed his constituency team throughout the constituency to map and call in scores of priorities for clearing rubbish. He holds his regular constituency surgery this Friday, along with 8 constituency drop-ins next week. It is completely unacceptable that Birmingham residents have had to live with uncollected rubbish piling up the streets. Right, that's enough. It's the world's longest statement. But essentially, should he have gone to China?
Well,
Japan,
look,
apologies, Japan.
Japan, he's the one that needs to come on and defend that position, Peter. I mean, we have a city here, I would argue it is the second city, with 21,000 tonnes of rubbish piling up. And I think it's right that residents are calling for this to be, to come to a resolution. And, I do feel that we've got Labour MPs who are really not focusing on this. I don't see a huge focus on it in the House of Commons. People want this sorted. They want the Labour Council to get this sorted, to sort it out with the unions. And I personally think that as a Labour MP, or as any MP, if this was happening in the city that I represented or I was part of, I would want to see it out. I mean, the risk of the reputational damage to not just Birmingham but the wider West Midlands, is really, really concerning. We hear stories of rats the size of cats. The weather's really warm here today, which is great, but that only adds to problems with vermin and pests. And it just goes on and on. And despite the government saying, oh, this is an emergency, residents are still waiting for their rubbish to be collected, and it's not going to be resolved overnight. You look at your images and the scale of the problem.
I mean, in fairness, Angela Rayner did visit the Deputy Prime Minister. She's also the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government. She says the people of Birmingham are our first priority. Do your constituents feel that?
Well, so I think if you were a resident in Birmingham, I don't imagine for 1 minute that you would feel that you were the government's priority. So long as the situation continues, we're beyond 20 days now of this. it needs to be sorted. And the thing is, it then starts to have a knock-on effect into areas like Walsall, where my constituency is, with increased fly tipping. My local council's opened up the tips on certain hours, on certain days, as a way of helping. But I'm also pushing to make sure that Walsall is reimbursed for that cost, because the cost of the Labour's Birmingham bin strike should not fall on Walsall council taxpayers.
Wendy, I wonder if you think the Prime Minister should get involved with this?
Look, I think it's an emergency. This is a reputational issue. It's time the Prime Minister came out and said, right, we need to get this sorted. It's not good enough. This is the 21st century and we've got rubbish on the streets.
OK, Wendy Morton, thank you very much indeed. Wendy Morton is the MP for the Conservative Party for Aldridge Brownhills. It's also in the West Midlands. Wendy is also a shadow Foreign Office Minister as well. She was a minister in the Conservative government. What do you think about this? Maybe you're in Birmingham, you want to give me a ring. Maybe you want to talk about the lawyer we had on earlier. Maybe you want to talk about sourdough and how incredibly expensive it is. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll take your calls right up to 7 o'clock and then Kevin will be here. Stay with us.
It is good news that we have theme parks, that we can attract investment from around the world. There's no question about that. And I say that with relatives who live literally across the road from the site where that theme park's due to be built. They've not been ringing me up with vast enthusiasm. But having said that, investment is good. We shouldn't deride it. Whatever it may happen to be, as you say, it may well be very costly, but it's better here than it would be if it was in France or Germany.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Jacqueline is in Dorset and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Jacqueline, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you so much for taking my call. Peter, I have such admiration for the way you handled that. As you said, was not comfortable. What really, really struck me here was he would fit so comfortably, this man, into Starmer's inner circle. I think we've seen all of this play out in the government that we currently have.
The government still, first of all, thanks for your thoughts, Jacqueline, but the government still thinks Hamas is a terrorist organisation and indeed has said so. But I think you're talking about the tactics, perhaps. I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jacqueline.
Yes, I'm talking about the behaviour that, and quite, it's good in a sense. It's very uncomfortable to watch, but it was good to see, essentially how they operate. I mean, he was so nasty, aggressive, bullish, and then the threats, the police will be on your doorstep. And it didn't take long for this man to build up to that, which I found, I was shocked. I was totally shocked. He also, to my mind, personally, I felt totally out of his depth. I also feel, looking on screen at him, I thought he's certainly not getting any sleep. And I thought, what the hell do you expect? You asked a perfectly... the question you asked was what anybody else would be asking. Why are you representing them? And, and I just thought that all that he was plucking out the air to try and divert that question, it was pathetic. And I thought, have you really thought long and hard about what you're actually doing? And also I have to say, this highlights all that's wrong with the European Convention. I think it's total hypocrisy, not willing to listen. He has his own agenda, clearly. He did. He just showed us what we all thought.
Yeah. I've got a brilliant message from Robert. Can I read it out to you, Jacqueline?
Absolutely.
It's really funny. He says, "There's one thing for sure, I'm not buying a coffee off that barista."
Yeah.
Very good. Jacqueline, listen.
When all else fails.
Well, indeed. Turn to humour.
We've got to have a sense of humour.
Well, after that interview, you've got to. Listen, Jacqueline, thank you. I really appreciate your thoughts and your kind words as well. Robert, you've given me the laugh that I needed today. And Glenn in Belvedere says, "You look nervous. Are you waiting for the police to burst through your door?" Maybe they will. I would argue it's free speech. Frank McGuinness may feel differently on that. Let's talk to Rob in Portsmouth, who has given me a ring on this. Rob, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hi. You seem to have a lot of Roberts today, so sorry to confuse it.
That's all right.
I think your last speaker, Jacqueline's said a lot what I was going to say, but I think everyone's just so shocked with that barrister. The only thing I wanted to say is that I can add to what everyone else has said, because I think everyone is stunned by it. And yes, you did very well to keep you calm, because I was watching it from afar and I found it difficult to keep calm. Solicitors, barristers, a lot of them are called ambulance chasers because they just chase the money, and he just seemed to be like the worst of them.
I'm sure he would deny that, and I actually worry, Rob, that it's worse than that. I think he believes it. I think he believes in what he's doing. He didn't at any point demur from that. I mean, maybe that's an incorrect characterization.
You don't think he's doing it for the money? You think he actually believes?
Yeah. I think he thinks they shouldn't be prescribed. Certainly, I've looked at his thoughts online and so on his. Someone actually sent me his Twitter as well, and he has one of those. It was Julia, not Julia Hartley-Brewer, Julia, someone else, who sent me his Twitter, and it says communist barrister. He has the watermelon logo as well, which a lot of people have. I'm not suggesting that Frank McGuinness has, but some people put that on their social media to say that they support Hamas.
I thought that was a racist thing.
Current focus representing Palestinian asylum seekers and people fired for pro-Palestinian speech. And then he's written something in the Irish language as well, which I'm afraid I don't know what that is. But no, certainly, Rob, it was an interesting interview. certainly, and I think
it was very interesting and very well done. But it's shocking, and you almost think, should these people be allowed to?
Well, they've got free speech and people have a right to be represented. But I do wonder. I don't think I don't think as I think Frank McGuinness thought, that you can't then question, well, why are you doing this? Why are you representing these people when you've? That's why I said at the very start of the interview, I said, I want to be clear on this. Have you chosen to take this case? Is this an active choice? And he said it was. So that's what I wanted to be really clear before I simply said, I hear all the time. I know people who are criminal barristers, for example, they say, how do you represent, rapists or murderers or whatever? And they say, well, everyone's entitled to representation, and we do it on the taxi rank system, and you just take the cases that you get. But he has actively chosen to do this. So
yeah, but I think he even pretended not to know what the taxi rank system was. Didn't he?
Oh, I think he knows. I think he knows. But Rob, listen.
Of course he does. But
anyway. Okay. Well, Rob, listen. Thanks for your call.
I don't think I'll be using that company. If ever I need to. But anyway.
All right, Rob. Well, I hope you don't need legal representation anytime soon. I'm sure you're a very law-abiding citizen, Rob. Lots of people. In touch. I'm trying not to read out the nice things. There are lots of nice things, and I really appreciate them, but I don't want to be self-indulgent and say, look at me, I'm marvellous. Listen, Marie says, I too had a similar interaction with someone today. I kept my cool and stuck to the facts. While the person got angry, shouted at me and deviated from the facts and made it personal. I shut the door on them, says Marie. Let me see. Yes, this person says, just been listening to that so-called interview with that treacherous scumbag lawyer barrister. You've gone up 1,000% in my estimation, says this person, and the way you deal with his unprofessionalism. Well done, Peter. I'm not saying, by the way, that he's treacherous or a scumbag. Maybe he'll sue me, maybe he won't. Maybe the police will turn up on my door. I don't know. Lynn says, that barrister you just had was so arrogant, and I would suggest that he took the Hamas case because no one else wanted him to represent them. Jane in Chester says the Hamas lawyer reduced his argument to insults when he was losing the discussion, which speaks volumes. Rob says you got under that barrister's skin such that he resorted to insults against you. Well done, you won the argument. And another person says he doesn't know how well he explained his position. Well, now we can draw our own conclusions. Graham says, what a pleasant person that barrister is, if only we were all as perfect as him. I think he perhaps has his tongue in his cheek. Shan says, listening to your interview with Frank McGuinness made my blood boil. Taking my hat off to you. Bex says, Margaret, currently in Tunisia. What a show you're having. You're right, Margaret. How pompous, rude and argumentative is that barrister? He is the epitome of what has happened to our legal system, says Margaret. And another person says, would this barrister be happy to represent an Israeli government minister in any actions against the Home Secretary or UK government, which is a very interesting point as well. Haley and Max, two people, I think mother and son, if I'm right, are on the line. They are new callers, plural, and you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you very much. So, hi, Peter. I thought you were great. Hi. So, Max and I have been listening to it together, and my worry is, or the concern is, just if he is in a professional position as a lawyer, representing people in this country, what future have we got? Not just for Jews living here, but, any normal people, how can what is the future of people living here when if people are going that way and believing like he is?
Listen, I've got a message from Bob in Cheltenham I'm going to read out to you, which I think you'll be interested in, Haley, who said, Bob says, how do you sleep at night is a provocative question, but it's also a that's what I asked him. That was my, third question to him. How do you sleep at night is a provocative question, but it's also a standard question a criminal barrister is normally asked at a dinner party or any social event by non-lawyers. Although a different field of law, that Garden Court barrister should feel quite embarrassed in the way he reacted. He might require some more media training before he appears on TV and radio again, says Bob in Cheltenham. But Haley, it was certainly interesting.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Oh, that's Max. Max now.
Oh, yeah, that's Max, sorry. Yeah.
Max, you go ahead.
I thought he did really well to keep you calm with him, because I know I would have lost my head with him. But I just don't understand how these people are allowed to have a platform in our country, trying to promote this terrorism, these Hamas people who go into Israel, rape Jews who've done nothing wrong, take them into Gaza. I just don't understand how you can have a different view of other than they're a terrorist organisation. It just bemuses me. how people like that exist.
Max, how old are you?
16.
You're a very articulate young man, and your mother's a very articulate woman. Thank you both very much. Either of you can ring me again, although if you're under 18, I think you need parental permission if you're under 18, so yes. Max, do check with your mum if you want to ring in again, but great to hear from both of you, and thank you for your support. Graham is a new caller in Liverpool. Graham, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
Thanks very much, Peter. I've been a long-time listener. I've contributed to Mike Graham many, many times. I thought you went a bit soft on that particular barrister there. I thought his attitude was condescending, rude, dismissive, and quite frankly, arrogant in terms of what he had to say, in terms of the way he tried to streamline your questioning. What an arrogant, disgusting man. If we look at the facts, let's look at the way that he tried to present it. He tried to disrupt you. You were presenting him with decent facts. Let's have it straight, Peter. Hamas are a prescribed terrorist organisation. He would not accept it. You can't teach people that are blind to see the way through the quagmire. He was blind. He was disgusting. He didn't have an argument. And every time you tried to present your arguments to him, and I thought you kept your cool perfectly fine there, he tried to make it personal. He's a disgusting. Well,
listen, he's entitled to represent who he wants to represent, Graham. But yeah, it's also, I mean, look, there's free speech in this country, there's freedom of representation in the law and so on. But I think maybe I did go a bit soft on him at one point. But at the same time, I just think, Graham, sometimes you just let people talk and they kind of reveal themselves. I mean, you know yourself, Mike, for example, would have done that interview in a very different way to the way I did it. Neither of us is necessarily right or wrong. It's just a slightly different way of doing things, isn't it?
No criticism of the way.
No, I know. Yeah.
You gave him the ropes to let him hang himself, and that's a journalistic skill. And you're immensely skilled in all the days you spent in the governments and the parliaments, and as I say.
Well, it's very, very, very kind of you to say so, Graham. Listen, thank you very much for your thoughts on that. That was Graham in Liverpool there. Thanks to all the other callers. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get everybody in today. It's been a very, very busy day on the programme, and quite an interesting hour as well, I would argue. Kevin, hello, sir.
How are you doing, Peter?
I'm all right, thanks. Yeah.
In an hour's time, we spoke to a victim of the grooming gang scandal last night who was in Silhouette, Elizabeth. Very moving story, very brave woman. We have another victim tonight who's going to show herself and name herself, and she's got one hell of a story to tell, a harrowing story.
Well, good for you for continuing to shine a light on this, because there's so many parts of the media, Kevin, that are ignoring this.
Yeah, what's wrong with the BBC? Why aren't they doing this?
It's not just them, it's others as well, and I don't understand why.
Well, I think we know. Also tonight, a story that actually you were interviewed about last night. We want to get back into Jake Farry, the driller killer.
Yes.
The parole board looks set to let this guy out. I mean, what is their obsession about releasing this guy? They released him in January after 14 years of a murder life sentence after he murdered a nice schoolboy called Jimmy Mizzen, only 16 years old, killed him for no reason.
It's just a really quick question, isn't it, if you're on the parole board? Is he rehabilitated? No. Yeah. Right, keep him in prison. Done.
When they let him out last time, he completely broke the terms of his licence, and when they made a video,
and made money from it as well. And I think there's perhaps action to be taken under the Proceeds of Crime Act. I think there are questions as well for these platforms that host this stuff.
Absolutely. The BBC, of course,